Hello everyone and welcome. This is Fiction Domain speaking. We have handpicked a wonderful story for today. What if Gringotts emancipated Harry at age 8 after finding Dumbledore's 100 illegal compulsions? New videos drop regularly, so subscribe and hit the bell to stay updated. And don't forget to like if you enjoy the story. Shall we begin? Here goes. Chapter 1, The Letter from Gringotts. The cupboard under the stairs at number 4, Privet Drive had never felt smaller to Harry Potter than it did on this particular July morning. At 8 years old, he had grown accustomed to the cramped space, the spiders that dangled from the ceiling, and the thin mattress that did little to cushion him from the hard floor. But today, something felt different. Harry sat up, careful not to hit his head on the sloped ceiling, a lesson learned through numerous painful bumps. His glasses, held together by Scotch tape after Dudley's latest Harry hunting session, perched precariously on his nose. Through the slats in the cupboard door, thin beams of morning light cast striped shadows across his threadbare blanket. Something had woken him. Not Aunt Petunia's shrill voice or her bony knuckles rapping on his door, but something else. A feeling like electricity buzzing beneath his skin. He rubbed his eyes beneath his glasses and tried to shake the strange sensation. It wasn't the first odd thing to happen to him lately. Last week, when Dudley had pushed him into the rosebushes, Harry had felt a similar surge of something, right before all the thorns seemed to bend away from his skin. And 3 days ago, when Uncle Vernon had locked him in the cupboard without dinner for supposedly tracking mud on the clean kitchen floor, it had been Dudley. Harry had felt an intense hunger pang followed by that same buzzing sensation, and suddenly found a shiny red apple under his pillow. Harry had learned long ago that mentioning such abnormalities to the Dursleys resulted in punishment, so he kept these occurrences to himself. But they were happening more frequently, and with greater intensity. A thud on the stairs above sent a shower of dust onto Harry's head. Dudley was up, thundering down the stairs as usual. "Boy!" Uncle Vernon's voice bellowed from the kitchen. "Get up and cook breakfast. And don't burn the bacon this time." Harry sighed and prepared to face another day of servitude. He pulled on Dudley's oversized hand-me-downs and pushed open his cupboard door. The Dursley kitchen gleamed with morning sunlight and excessive cleanliness. Aunt Petunia stood at the sink, her horse-like face pinched as she scrutinized the neighbor's laundry through the window. Uncle Vernon sat behind his newspaper, only his bushy mustache and reddened forehead visible. Dudley, already at the table, was counting his birthday presents from last month, arranging and rearranging them as though hoping they might multiply. "Hurry up, boy," Uncle Vernon grunted without lowering his newspaper. "I want my coffee." Harry moved to the stove, dragging over the step stool so he could reach the burners. He'd been cooking breakfast since he was 6, when Aunt Petunia decided he was tall enough to reach the stove with assistance. Burns on his arms had taught him caution. As he laid strips of bacon in the pan, that strange buzzing feeling returned, stronger this time. Harry's hand trembled slightly, and he gripped the spatula tighter. "What's wrong with you?" Aunt Petunia snapped, noticing his unsteadiness. "Nothing, Aunt Petunia," Harry replied automatically. But it wasn't nothing. The buzzing had become a hum, vibrating through his bones, making the hairs on his arms stand up. The bacon sizzled, fat popping in the pan, and suddenly, crack. All 4 burners on the stove ignited at once, blue flames shooting upward nearly 2 feet. Aunt Petunia shrieked. Uncle Vernon's newspaper dropped. Dudley fell backward off his chair. "What have you done?" Uncle Vernon roared, face purpling as he leapt to his feet. I didn't do anything." Harry stammered, backing away from the stove. Aunt Petunia lunged forward and turned off the gas, her hands shaking. The flames died instantly, leaving everyone staring at the now normal stove. The bacon, somehow, was perfectly cooked. "You!" Uncle Vernon advanced on Harry, one meaty finger pointed at his chest. "Your freakishness. I won't have it in this house." Harry backed away until he hit the wall. "I didn't do anything, I swear." Vernon, Aunt Petunia's voice was unusually tight, even for her. Look. She was pointing at the window. There, perched on the ledge outside, was an owl. In broad daylight. And it appeared to be staring directly at Harry. Shoo! Get away! Uncle Vernon stomped toward the window, waving his arms. But the owl didn't move. Instead, it tapped the glass with its beak, revealing a small envelope tied to its leg. Harry stared. He'd never seen an owl deliver mail, he'd never seen an owl in person at all. But somehow, he knew, inexplicably, that the letter was for him. Uncle Vernon seemed to reach the same conclusion. His face, already purple with rage, darkened further. No, he whispered. No, no, and no. It's too early. He's not supposed to. Aunt Petunia grabbed Vernon's arm. The neighbors, she hissed. They'll see. Vernon hesitated, torn between his fear of abnormality and his greater fear of the neighbors witnessing said abnormality. With a growl, he unlatched the window. The owl hopped inside, utterly unperturbed by Vernon's threatening gestures. It flew directly to Harry and held out its leg. The envelope was made of thick, cream-colored parchment, and green ink spelled out, Mr. H. Potter. The cupboard under the stairs 4, Privet Drive. Little whinging Surrey. Harry reached for it, but Uncle Vernon was faster. He snatched the envelope and held it high. That's mine. Harry protested. It has my name on it. Yours? Who'd be writing to you? Vernon sneered, examining the envelope. When he saw the wax seal on the back, some kind of emblem with a large G surrounded by incomprehensible symbols, his face went from purple to ashen white. Petunia, he stammered, holding out the letter. Aunt Petunia took it, and her reaction was even more extreme. She gasped, her free hand flying to her throat, and she seemed to sway on the spot. It's not from them, she whispered. It's from those creatures. The bank. Bank? Harry asked, confusion momentarily overriding his anger at having his letter taken. The owl, apparently tired of waiting, gave an irritated hoot and pecked sharply at Vernon's hand. With a yelp, Vernon dropped the letter. The owl snatched it mid-air and dropped it directly into Harry's hands, then flew to perch on the refrigerator, watching intently. Don't open it. Aunt Petunia shrieked. But Harry had already broken the seal. Something about the letter felt important, essential, even, and that strange buzzing in his veins seemed to pulse in agreement. Inside was a single sheet of the same thick parchment, covered in an elegant, slanted script. Gringotts Wizarding Bank. Mr. Potter, it has come to the attention of Gringotts Bank that there are severe magical anomalies associated with your person and accounts. Our monitoring charms have detected dangerous fluctuations in your magical core that require immediate attention. Further, as the last living Potter and heir to an ancient and noble house, there are financial and legal matters that cannot be postponed any longer despite your minor status. Your magical guardian has been notified of these concerns on 3 separate occasions and has failed to respond appropriately. As per Treaty of 1752, Section 4, Paragraph 12, Gringotts is therefore empowered to contact you directly. A Gringotts representative will arrive at your residence today at 10 a.m. precisely to escort you to the bank for consultation. Your attendance is not optional. May your gold flow and your enemies tremble. Ragnarok, Director of Inheritance Affairs, Gringotts Bank, London Branch. Harry read the letter twice, his heart pounding. Magical anomalies. Magical guardian. Ancient and noble house. None of it made sense, and yet it felt true. Like pieces of a puzzle he hadn't known he was solving were finally falling into place. He looked up to find the Dursleys staring at him with varying expressions of horror. What does it mean? He asked. Nothing. Uncle Vernon snatched at the letter again, but Harry was quicker this time, dodging behind a chair. It's nonsense, rubbish, a prank. Vernon, Aunt Petunia's voice was barely a whisper. They're coming here. Today. At 10 o'clock. Uncle Vernon checked his watch and made a strangled sound. It was already 9:30. "We'll leave," he declared. "Pack a bag, Petunia. Quickly. We'll go to Marge's." "It won't work," Aunt Petunia said hollowly. "They'll find him. They always do." "What is going on?" Harry finally shouted, his frustration overcoming years of conditioning to stay quiet and invisible. The lights in the kitchen flickered. The buzzing in Harry's veins had become a roar. Dudley, who had been watching the proceedings with uncharacteristic silence, suddenly yelped and pointed at Harry's hands. Tiny sparks, like miniature fireworks, were dancing across Harry's fingertips. "You're one of them," Aunt Petunia spat, her face contorted with a mixture of fear and disgust. "A freak. A wizard. Just like my perfect sister and that awful boy she married." "A wizard?" Harry repeated, staring at the sparks that were now fading from his hands. "We swore when we took you in that we'd stamp it out of you," Uncle Vernon growled. "Your parents got themselves blown up with their unnatural nonsense, and we weren't going to have it." "Blown up?" Harry's head was spinning. "You told me they died in a car crash." "Car crash," a new voice thundered from the direction of the front door, which none of them had heard open. "A car crash, kill Lily and James Potter." Standing in the kitchen doorway was the most peculiar man Harry had ever seen. He stood about 5 feet tall, with a disproportionately large head, pointed ears, and a hooked nose. His dark, shrewd eyes scanned the kitchen with obvious distaste, lingering momentarily on Harry before fixing the Dursleys with a contemptuous glare. He wore what appeared to be a perfectly tailored suit made of some shimmering dark material, and in one gnarled hand, he held what could only be described as a thin wooden stick. "Gringotts representative Griphook," the creature announced with a formal bow that somehow managed to convey not an ounce of actual respect. "I am here for Mr. Harry Potter." Uncle Vernon, momentarily shocked into silence, found his voice. "Now see here. You can't just barge into our home." The creature, Griphook, pointed his stick at Vernon, who immediately fell silent, though his mouth continued to move. Silencing charm, Griphook explained to Harry with a toothy smile that looked more predatory than friendly. "Temporary, unfortunately." "You're not human," Harry said hesitantly. "How observant," Griphook replied dryly. "I am a goblin, Mr. Potter, and an employee of Gringotts Wizarding Bank. I assume you've read our letter?" Harry nodded, still clutching the parchment. "Good. Then you understand the urgency of the situation. We must depart immediately." Griphook checked a gold pocket watch. "We are precisely on schedule. Do you have anything you wish to bring with you?" Harry thought about his cupboard, about his few broken toys salvaged from Dudley's discards, about the threadbare clothes and thin blanket. He shook his head. "Nothing." Griphook raised an eyebrow, looking around the kitchen with new understanding. His eyes narrowed as they passed over the cupboard door with its small ventilation grate and latch on the outside. "I see. Very well, that simplifies matters." Aunt Petunia had backed against the sink, one arm protectively around Dudley. "You can't take him," she said, but her voice lacked conviction. "Madam," Griphook's voice dripped with disdain, "your legal guardianship of Mr. Potter is about to become a matter of intense scrutiny. I suggest you do not compound your situation by interfering with official Gringotts business." Harry wasn't entirely sure what was happening, but one thing was clear: this was his chance to escape Privet Drive, perhaps forever. He stepped toward the goblin. "I'm ready," he said. "Excellent." Griphook extended his hand. "We will be traveling by Portkey. It may be uncomfortable for your first magical transportation, but it is the most secure method." Harry tentatively took the goblin's hand, which felt warm and leathery against his own. "Wait!" Aunt Petunia cried. "What do we tell him?" "The old man." Griphook smiled, showing pointed teeth. "I'm sure you'll think of something, Mrs. Dursley. Though I wouldn't worry, you'll likely be hearing from him very soon." And with that cryptic statement, Griphook pulled a small golden coin from his pocket, muttered something in a harsh, guttural language, and Harry felt an abrupt jerk behind his navel. The Dursleys' kitchen spun away in a blur of colors, and Harry was falling through a whirlwind of sound and sensation. His feet slammed into solid ground, and only Griphook's steadying hand prevented him from toppling over. Harry blinked, trying to orient himself. They stood in a vast marble hall, so large that it made Harry feel smaller than even his cupboard did. Countless crystal chandeliers hung from the vaulted ceiling, casting warm light over rows of high counters. Behind these counters sat dozens of goblins, some counting piles of jewels, others examining documents through magnifying glasses, a few weighing gold coins on brass scales. "Welcome to Gringotts Wizarding Bank, Mr. Potter," Griphook said, releasing Harry's hand. "The financial heart of magical Britain." Harry could only stare, open-mouthed. Through massive bronze doors at the far end of the hall, he glimpsed a cobblestone street bustling with people wearing robes and pointed hats. Closer to them, witches and wizards, for what else could they be, stood in lines before the counters, conducting their business with the goblin tellers. "This way," Griphook directed, leading Harry past the main counters toward a corridor lined with doors. "Director Ragnarok is waiting, and he is not a goblin who appreciates tardiness." Harry hurried to keep up with Griphook's surprisingly quick stride. "What's happening? Why am I here? What did the letter mean about magical anomalies?" "All will be explained by the director," Griphook replied without slowing. "I am merely your escort." They passed through corridors of increasing opulence, from marble to granite inlaid with silver, to walls adorned with tapestries depicting what appeared to be battles between goblins and wizards. Finally, they reached a set of doors made of dark wood, emblazoned with gold runes. Two goblin guards stood at attention, each armed with a wickedly sharp halberd. Griphook exchanged words with the guards in that same harsh language Harry had heard before. The guards scrutinized Harry, their gazes lingering on his forehead, before stepping aside. The doors swung open silently. "Director Ragnarok will see you now," Griphook announced. "Remember, Mr. Potter, among goblins, directness is respected, dishonesty is despised, and time is literally valued as gold." With that instruction, Griphook ushered Harry into what could only be described as a throne room for finance. The chamber was circular, lined with shelves of ancient-looking books and artifacts. In the center stood a massive desk of polished obsidian, behind which sat the most imposing goblin Harry had yet seen. Director Ragnarok was older than Griphook, with silver streaking his dark hair and beard. He wore elaborate robes embroidered with gold thread, and several rings adorned his long fingers. When he looked up at Harry's entrance, his eyes were sharp and calculating. "Harry Potter," he stated rather than asked. "Approach." Harry stepped forward, acutely aware of his shabby appearance in this magnificent setting. "Sir," Harry began, remembering Griphook's advice about directness, "I don't understand why I'm here or what any of this means. The letter mentioned magical anomalies and accounts, but I don't have any accounts, and I didn't know magic was real until about 30 minutes ago." Ragnarok's bushy eyebrows shot up. "You were unaware of magic? Unaware of your heritage and status in the wizarding world?" "Yes, sir. My aunt and uncle told me my parents died in a car crash. They don't like abnormal things." A low growl emanated from Ragnarok's throat. "Sit," he commanded, indicating a chair before his desk that Harry hadn't noticed before. Harry sat. The chair adjusted itself to his height, another small magic that under other circumstances might have delighted him. "Griphook, summon Cursebreaker Blacktooth and Healer Silverfinger immediately," Ragnarok ordered. "And bring the Potter account ledgers." Griphook bowed and exited swiftly. Ragnarok fixed Harry with a penetrating stare. "Mr. Potter, what I am about to tell you will be difficult to hear, but time is of the essence. Your magical core is dangerously unstable, and based on preliminary investigations, we believe this is due to numerous unauthorized magical bindings and compulsions placed upon you." "Bindings? Compulsions?" Harry repeated, trying to make sense of the unfamiliar terms. Spells, Ragnarok clarified, placed upon you to restrict your natural magical abilities and to influence your behavior and decisions. Such spells are highly regulated and, in most cases, illegal when placed on a minor without specific medical necessity or familial consent. Harry felt a chill run through him. Someone's been controlling me. With magic? That is what we intend to determine, Ragnarok replied grimly. The fluctuations in your magic that drew our attention suggest these bindings are beginning to fail, likely because your natural magical strength is growing as you approach your 9th birthday. When powerful bindings fail, the results can be catastrophic. Harry thought about the strange incidents at Privet Drive, the stove's flames, the apple appearing, the rose bushes moving, and realized with dawning horror that these were probably signs of whatever was happening to his magic. The door opened, and Griphook returned, accompanied by 2 other goblins. One carried a large leather-bound book, which he placed on Ragnarok's desk. The other 2 carried what appeared to be specialized equipment, crystal instruments, vials of various liquids, and several ornate daggers. Mr. Potter, Ragnarok gestured to the newcomers, this is Cursebreaker Blacktooth and Healer Silverfinger. They will examine you magically to determine the extent of the interference with your person. With your permission. Harry hesitated only briefly before nodding. Whatever was happening to him, these goblins seemed intent on helping, which was more than anyone had ever done before. Before we begin, Ragnarok continued, opening the ledger Griphook had brought, there are financial matters to address. As the sole heir to the ancient and noble house of Potter, you are entitled to substantial assets currently held in trust. I have money. Harry blurted, unable to contain his surprise. Ragnarok's expression might have been amusement or pity, it was hard to tell. Mr. Potter, the Potter family is one of the oldest and wealthiest wizarding families in Britain. Your trust vault alone contains over 50,000 galleons, wizarding gold, he clarified, seeing Harry's confusion. The main Potter family vaults contain significantly more, along with properties, investments, and heirlooms, though you cannot access those until you reach magical majority at 17, under normal circumstances. Harry's mind reeled. All those years of wearing Dudley's cast-offs, of being told he was a burden on the Dursleys' finances. My aunt and uncle, do they know about this money? They should not, Ragnarok said sharply. Access to your vaults is restricted to you and your magical guardian. And who's that? My magical guardian. Ragnarok's expression darkened. According to official records, Albus Dumbledore. Who's, the headmaster of Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry, Ragnarok supplied. Supreme Mugwump of the International Confederation of Wizards. Chief Warlock of the Wizengamot. And, it seems, the wizard responsible for placing you with your Muggle relatives and, we strongly suspect, for the magical tampering we are about to investigate. Harry felt as though the room were tilting. Someone that powerful had been making decisions about his life. Had possibly been putting spells on him. And had left him with the Dursleys. If you're ready, Mr. Potter, Healer Silverfinger stepped forward, we would like to begin our examination. Harry nodded, still dazed by the revelations. The examination was unlike anything Harry could have imagined. The goblin healer waved his hands over Harry in complex patterns while chanting in that guttural language. Cursebreaker Blacktooth circled him, holding crystal instruments that hummed and changed colors in response to whatever they detected. As the examination progressed, the goblins' expressions grew increasingly grim. They consulted with each other in hushed tones, occasionally making notations on pieces of parchment. Finally, after what seemed like hours but was probably only 20 minutes, they turned to Ragnarok. Director, Healer Silverfinger's voice was tight with what sounded like controlled rage. The young wizard has no fewer than 27 distinct magical bindings, compulsions, and monitoring charms placed upon his person. 15 of these bear the magical signature of Albus Dumbledore. Ragnarok's hands clenched on his desk. Enumerate. Silverfinger consulted his notes. 6 magical core bindings, restricting his access to approximately 75% of his natural magical strength. For behavioral compulsions, 1 promoting submissiveness to authority figures, 1 suppressing curiosity, 1 creating aversion to self-reflection, and 1, most disturbingly, creating an emotional attachment to and dependence on Albus Dumbledore specifically. Harry felt sick. Someone had put spells on him to make him submissive. To stop him from asking questions. To make him emotionally dependent on a man he'd never even met. Continue, Ragnarok ordered, his voice deceptively calm. 3 memory blocks, Blacktooth took over, obscuring early childhood memories. A blood-tied ward system anchored to his maternal aunt, drawing power directly from Mr. Potter's core rather than from the property as is standard. Multiple tracking charms, some keyed to specific magical signatures we cannot identify. A mail redirection ward preventing unauthorized correspondence from reaching him. And Blacktooth hesitated, exchanging a look with Silverfinger. Speak, Ragnarok commanded. A soul fragment, Blacktooth said quietly. Dark, foreign, and anchored to the cursed scar on his forehead. It appears to have been contained by one of Dumbledore's bindings, but as that binding weakens, it grows more active. Harry's hand flew to his forehead, to the lightning-shaped scar he'd had for as long as he could remember. There's something, in my scar. A fragment of dark magic, Silverfinger confirmed. Not of your making, but attached to you. It is likely related to the curse that gave you that scar to begin with. Can everything be removed? Harry asked, his voice small. Yes, Ragnarok said firmly. Though the process will be neither simple nor painless. The question, Mr. Potter, is what you wish to do about the wizard who placed these restrictions upon you. Harry thought about the cupboard, about years of neglect and misery, about the truth of his parents' death being hidden from him, about someone powerful enough to be the head of a school and part of a government deciding that Harry should be kept weak, submissive, and ignorant. What can I do? He asked. He sounds powerful, and I'm just, me. Ragnarok's smile was sharp enough to cut glass. That, Mr. Potter, is where Gringotts can offer a unique solution. Under Goblin law, and by the wizarding treaties that govern our relationship with magical Britain, magical tampering of this magnitude constitutes an attempt at line theft, a crime against your family legacy. As the last Potter, you have the right to seek emancipation to protect yourself and your family's assets. Emancipation? Legal and magical recognition as an adult, despite your age, Ragnarok explained. It would remove you from Dumbledore's guardianship, grant you control of your family vaults, and most importantly, allow us to remove these bindings without requiring guardian consent. It would also, Griphook added, speaking for the first time since the examination began, prevent anyone from legally forcing you to return to your Muggle relatives. That decided it for Harry. What do I need to do? The ritual requires your blood freely given, your magic willingly shared, and your intent clearly stated, Ragnarok explained. It is not undertaken lightly. Once emancipated, you will be responsible for your own decisions and welfare. Harry thought about his life thus far, cooking meals he wasn't allowed to eat, wearing clothes that didn't fit, sleeping in a cupboard, being blamed for things he didn't do. How much worse could being responsible for himself really be? I want to do it, he said firmly. Ragnarok nodded, seemingly satisfied with Harry's resolve. Preparations will take approximately 1 hour. In the meantime, Griphook will escort you to a private room where you can rest and refresh yourself. I suggest you take the opportunity to consider what path you wish to take once freed from these bindings. The wizarding world will present both opportunities and dangers for an emancipated Potter heir. Harry nodded, suddenly feeling exhausted by the morning's revelations. As Griphook led him from Ragnarok's office, Harry's mind whirled with possibilities. Freedom from the Dursleys. Control over his own magic. A chance to learn about his parents and his heritage. For the first time in his young life, Harry Potter's future was his own to determine. The private room Griphook led him to was small but luxurious by Harry's standards, furnished with a comfortable chair, a small table bearing refreshments, and a window charmed to show a forest scene despite being deep underground. Harry ate cautiously at first, then with growing enthusiasm as he realized he was actually allowed to take as much as he wanted of the fruit, cheese, and small sandwiches provided. "Mr. Potter," Griphook said as Harry finished his meal, "it is time." Harry followed the goblin through more winding corridors, descending deeper into Gringotts. The air grew cooler, the lighting dimmer, and the decor more ancient. Finally, they reached a circular chamber carved from raw stone. The walls were inscribed with runes that seemed to shift and move when Harry wasn't looking directly at them. In the center stood a raised stone dais, around which 5 goblins including Ragnarok stood waiting. "Mr. Potter," Ragnarok greeted him formally. "Are you prepared to undertake the ritual of emancipation, with all rights and responsibilities thereof?" "I am," Harry replied, surprised at the steadiness in his voice. Then approached the dais. Harry stepped onto the stone platform. The runes around the chamber began to glow with a soft blue light. "The ritual has 3 components," Ragnarok explained, producing a small silver knife. "First, blood freely given to establish your identity as the last of the Potter line." He handed the knife to Harry, who hesitated only briefly before pricking his finger. The small drop of blood that welled up seemed to shimmer in the runic light. "Let it fall upon the stone," Ragnarok instructed. Harry did so. Where his blood touched the dais, gold lines spread outward in an intricate pattern, forming what looked like a family tree with Harry's name at the bottom. "Next, magic willingly shared to demonstrate your capacity to control your own power." This part was trickier. Harry had never consciously used magic. "Focus on that feeling you described earlier," Griphook suggested from the edge of the chamber. "The buzzing beneath your skin." Harry closed his eyes, concentrating on that now familiar sensation. It was easier to find here, as though the chamber itself amplified his awareness of it. The buzzing built, flowing through him like a current. "Now, direct it outward, through your hand," Ragnarok's voice guided him. "Imagine it flowing into the stone beneath your feet." Harry extended his hand, palm down, and visualized the energy pouring from him into the dais. The effort made him dizzy, but he persisted. When he opened his eyes, the gold lines were glowing brighter, and threads of emerald green, the exact color of his eyes, had joined them, weaving through the pattern. "Excellent," Ragnarok nodded approvingly. "Your natural magic is strong, even partially bound as it still is." Finally, intent clearly stated. "You must declare your desire for emancipation in your own words, Mr. Potter." Harry took a deep breath. This was it, the moment that would change everything. He thought carefully about what to say, wanting to get it right. "I, Harry James Potter, last of the Potter line, choose freedom from guardianship and control. I claim the right to determine my own path, manage my family's legacy, and learn magic without restriction. I accept the responsibilities that come with these rights, and I swear to honor my family's name in how I use them." The words felt right as he spoke them, as though they were being pulled from somewhere deep inside him. As the last syllable left his lips, the golden and green lines flared blindingly bright. Harry felt a surge of power rush through him, like electricity but warmer, more vital. Then, with a sound like breaking glass, something shattered within him. It was pain beyond anything Harry had ever experienced. His entire body convulsed as the magic of the ritual collided with Dumbledore's bindings. Harry might have screamed, he wasn't sure. His vision went white, then black, then blazed with colors he had no names for. He was distantly aware of the goblins chanting, of more magic flowing around and through him, of Blacktooth and Silverfinger working frantically to safely dismantle the compulsions as they broke. And then, abruptly, it stopped. Harry found himself on his hands and knees on the dais, breathing hard. The chamber was silent except for the soft hum of the still-glowing runes. "It is done," Ragnarok announced. "The bindings are broken, the compulsions removed, the monitoring charms disabled." Harry slowly sat back on his heels, then carefully stood. He felt different. Lighter, somehow, as though he'd been carrying a great weight for so long he'd forgotten it was there until it was removed. His magic, and he could feel it now, a warm, living force flowing freely through him, responded eagerly to his awareness, small sparks dancing at his fingertips. "And the thing in my scar?" Harry asked hesitantly. "Extracted and contained," Blacktooth confirmed, indicating a small, heavily warded box to one side of the chamber. "It will be destroyed using goblin methods that leave no trace." Harry reached up to touch his forehead. The scar was still there, but it no longer felt warm and sometimes painful as it had for as long as he could remember. It was just a mark now, nothing more. "What happens now?" Harry asked, looking around at the gathered goblins. "Now, Mr. Potter," Ragnarok said, "you begin your new life. As an emancipated wizard, you have full access to your family vaults, properties, and heirlooms. You have the legal right to live where you choose, study magic as you see fit, and make contracts in your own name." "I don't know where to start," Harry admitted. "I don't know anything about being a wizard or about my family." "That," said a new voice from the chamber entrance, "is where I might be of assistance." Harry turned to see a tall, elegant woman with streaks of silver in her dark hair. She wore formal robes of midnight blue and carried herself with unmistakable authority. Most notably, she was human, the first which Harry had seen up close. "Mr. Potter, may I present Madame Andromeda Tonks," Ragnarok introduced her with a respectful nod. "Former member of the House of Black, registered healer, and one of the few humans Gringotts has on retainer for special cases." "It's an honor to meet you, Mr. Potter," Andromeda Tonks said, approaching the dais and extending her hand. "Your parents were known to me, though not closely. I'm here to offer my services as your magical and cultural liaison, should you wish it." Harry tentatively shook her hand. "Why would you want to help me? You don't even know me." Andromeda smiled, and there was genuine warmth in it. "Let's just say I have some experience with breaking away from controlling influences and forging my own path. The goblins contacted me because of my unique position, connected to Wizarding Society but not beholden to any of the major factions. I'm also bound by both healers' oaths and a Gringotts contract, which means your secrets are safe with me." Harry glanced at Ragnarok, who nodded almost imperceptibly. "I'd appreciate your help, Madame Tonks," Harry said. "I have a lot of questions." "I imagine you do," Andromeda replied. "And please, call me Andy. We'll have time for all your questions, but first, I think we should get you settled somewhere safe. Director Ragnarok, has an appropriate Potter property been identified?" "Indeed," Ragnarok confirmed, producing a scroll from within his robes. "We took the liberty of preparing a list of Potter properties that are habitable and secured. The most suitable appears to be Rose Cottage in Devon, remote enough for privacy but accessible to magical resources." "Rose Cottage," Harry repeated, tasting the name of what would be his first real home. "It was a favorite retreat of your grandparents," Grip Hook added. "It has been maintained by Potter house elves since your parents' deaths." "House elves?" "Magical servants bound to wizarding families," Andromeda explained. "It's a complex relationship that we can discuss in detail later. For now, know that they will have kept the cottage in perfect condition and will be overjoyed to serve the Potter heir again." It was all happening so fast. Just hours ago, Harry had been making breakfast for the Dursleys in their painfully normal suburban home. Now he was an emancipated wizard with property, wealth, and magic flowing freely through his veins. "Before you depart," Ragnarok said, "there is one final matter." He produced a small box of polished wood. "The Potter heir ring. With your emancipation, you are now entitled to wear it and claim your position as head of House Potter." Harry accepted the box with trembling hands. Inside, nestled on velvet, was a gold ring bearing a crest, a shield emblazoned with a griffin rampant, a wand, and what appeared to be a cloak billowing behind them. As Harry slipped it onto the ring finger of his right hand, it sized itself perfectly. A brief flare of golden light surrounded him, and Harry felt a subtle connection form, to what, he wasn't entirely sure, but it felt ancient and secure. The ring is enchanted with protections, Ragnock explained. It will resist minor curses, alert you to poisons in food or drink, and serve as a portkey to this very chamber should you find yourself in mortal danger. Merely twist it thrice and say, "Sanctuary," to activate that feature. Harry stared at the ring in awe. "Thank you, Director Ragnock. And thank you all," he added, looking around at the goblins who had changed his life in the span of a morning. "I won't forget what you've done for me today." "See that you don't, Mr. Potter," Ragnock replied with that same sharp smile. "Gringotts has made a significant investment in your future. We expect it to yield interesting returns." There was something calculating in the goblin's expression, but also something that might have been genuine concern. Harry realized that whatever their motives, the goblins had done him an enormous service, one that deserved repayment. "I'll make it worth your while," Harry promised. "Somehow." "I have no doubt," Ragnock said. "Now go, young Potter. Your new life awaits." As Andromeda led him from the ritual chamber, Harry's mind was already racing with plans. He would learn about magic, about his family, about this world he'd been kept from. He would discover why Dumbledore had placed those bindings on him, why he'd been left with the Dursleys, what the old wizard had been planning for Harry's future. But most importantly, he would forge his own path, free from compulsions, from artificial limitations, from others' expectations. For the first time in his life, Harry Potter was truly, completely free. And he intended to make the most of it. Chapter 2, Legacy and Learning. The Devon countryside rolled out before Harry like an emerald quilt, verdant hills punctuated by ancient stone walls and the occasional copse of trees. From the passenger seat of Andromeda Tonk's sensible Muggle car, he pressed his face against the window, drinking in the scenery with the desperate thirst of a child who had rarely been allowed beyond the confines of Privet Drive. "Almost there," Andromeda said, turning the car onto a narrow lane that didn't appear on any of the road signs they'd passed. "Rose Cottage is just beyond that hill. The Muggles can't see the turnoff, notice me not charms." Harry nodded, still getting used to the casual mentions of magic. In the 24 hours since his emancipation, he'd stayed in a room above a pub called the Leaky Cauldron, which served as a gateway between the Muggle world and Diagon Alley. Andromeda had taken him shopping for essentials, clothes that actually fit, toiletries, and a few books to begin his magical education. "Will I be alone there?" Harry asked, a flutter of anxiety in his stomach. Freedom was exhilarating but also terrifying. Andromeda smiled. "The house elves have been maintaining the property, as Griphook mentioned. And I'll be staying with you for the first few weeks to help you settle in. My husband Ted and daughter Nymphadora will visit on weekends. And then? Then we'll establish a routine for your education. I've already reached out to several potential tutors who can be trusted to be discreet. The goblins are arranging specialized instruction in finance and politics. And," she added with a sideways glance, "we'll need to determine how best to handle the inevitable moment when Dumbledore realizes you're no longer at the Dursleys." Harry's stomach clenched at the thought. According to what they'd learned at Gringotts, Albus Dumbledore was essentially the most powerful wizard in Britain, chief warlock of their government, supreme mugwump of some international organization, and headmaster of the school Harry would have attended at 11. And he'd placed all those bindings on Harry, left him with the abusive Dursleys, and apparently planned to control Harry's entire life. The car crested the hill, and Harry's worries momentarily faded. Below them, nestled in a small valley and surrounded by wild gardens, stood Rose Cottage. Calling it a cottage was like calling Gringotts a shop. The house was a sprawling two-story structure of honey-colored stone and dark timber, with a slate roof and multiple chimneys. Climbing roses, in full bloom despite the season, covered portions of the walls, their scent carrying even through the car windows. A small stream bubbled past one side of the property, crossed by a charming footbridge. "It's beautiful," Harry whispered. "It was your grandmother Euphemia's pride and joy," Andromeda said, steering the car down the final approach. "The gardens were famous in certain circles. She developed several magical rose varieties that are still used in potions today. As they pulled up to the front of the house, the heavy oak door swung open. A small creature with large, bat-like ears, bulging eyes the size of tennis balls, and skin the color of faded parchment rushed out. It wore what appeared to be a pristine pillowcase emblazoned with an emblem that matched the one on Harry's ear ring. "Master Harry Potter has come home at last," the creature squeaked, making a deep bow that caused its long nose to nearly touch the ground. "Mimsy has waited so long, kept everything ready." "Yes, she has." Harry looked questioningly at Andromeda as they exited the car. "This is a house elf," she explained quietly. "They're bound to wizarding families and properties. Treating them with kindness and respect is important, though their customs may seem strange to you at first." Harry approached the still bowing elf. "Hello, Mimsy. It's nice to meet you. Please stand up, you don't need to bow to me." The elf straightened, her enormous eyes filling with tears. "Master Harry is just as kind as his parents. Just as Mimsy always knew he would be." She sniffled, wiping her eyes on the edge of her pillowcase. "Mimsy has prepared the master suite and a guest room for Madame Tonks. Will Master Harry be wanting tea in the garden room or the library?" Harry, overwhelmed by the reception and unsure of the protocol, looked to Andromeda. "The library would be perfect, Mimsy," Andromeda replied smoothly. "And perhaps a light lunch? We've had a long drive." "Right away, madam." Mimsy clapped her hands excitedly and vanished with a soft pop. "She just, opérat," Andromeda supplied. "Wizard teleportation, essentially, though house elf magic works differently than ours. They can apparate where wizards cannot, including within homes protected against normal apparition." Harry nodded, filing away the information. Everything was so new, so different. But for the first time, it didn't feel overwhelming, just exciting. They entered the cottage, and Harry's breath caught. The interior was even more impressive than the exterior: warm wood paneling, comfortable furniture that somehow looked both antique and inviting, and windows that flooded every room with natural light. Family photographs adorned the walls, their subjects moving and smiling as they passed. Harry stopped before one, his heart pounding. A young couple danced in what appeared to be the very garden he'd glimpsed outside, autumn leaves swirling around them. The woman had Harry's eyes, vibrantly green and full of life. The man could have been Harry himself in 15 years, though his face was fuller, happier than Harry had ever seen his own. "Your parents," Andromeda said softly, stopping beside him. "James and Lily Potter. That was taken the autumn before you were born, I believe." Harry reached out, his fingers hovering just above the surface of the photograph. His parents smiled up at him, waving occasionally. His mother's laugh was silent but visible in the way her head tipped back, her red hair catching the sunlight. "They look so happy," he whispered. They were, by all accounts, Andromeda confirmed. "Your father came from an old, wealthy family but was known for his mischievous streak. Your mother was Muggle-born, brilliant at charms and potions, and fierce in her convictions. They were, very young when they had you. When they died." "How old?" Harry asked, still transfixed by the photograph. 21, Andromeda replied softly. "They married right out of Hogwarts, during the worst of the war. You were born when they were just 20. And they died a year later." Harry swallowed hard. So young, hardly more than children themselves. Barely adults. And yet they'd faced a Dark Lord, had tried to protect their son. "Mimsy has prepared the library, Master Harry," came the house elf's voice from behind them, interrupting his thoughts. "Tea and lunch is being served." Harry reluctantly turned from the photograph. "Thank you, Mimsy. And please, just call me Harry." The elf's eyes widened further, if that was possible. "Oh no, Master Harry. That wouldn't be proper at all. Mimsy is a proper Potter elf, she is." Harry glanced at Andromeda, who shook her head slightly. Perhaps we can discuss this further after lunch, he suggested diplomatically. Of course, Master Harry. Mimsy led them through the house, proudly pointing out features as they went. This is the formal dining room, though the Potters rarely used it except for holidays. The music room, Mistress Lily was learning the piano before. The elf's ears drooped momentarily before she brightened again. And here is the library. The library was everything a proper wizarding library should be, 2 stories tall with a spiral staircase connecting the levels, walls lined with bookshelves, comfortable reading chairs positioned near leaded windows, and a massive oak desk that looked as though it had served generations of Potters. A fire crackled merrily in the hearth despite the summer warmth outside, giving the room a cozy atmosphere. On a table between 2 armchairs, a tea service and plates of sandwiches, fruit, and small cakes awaited them. Harry's stomach rumbled. He was still getting used to the idea that he could eat whenever he was hungry. "This is brilliant," he said sincerely to Mimsy. "Thank you for keeping everything so perfect all these years." The elf beamed. "Mimsy and the other Potter elves have been caring for all Potter properties, Master Harry. We is always hoping the young master would come home." "Other elves? How many are there?" "Potter family has 5 elves total, Master Harry. Mimsy is head elf for Rose Cottage. Podgy is at Potter Manor, which is being sealed since that night. Tinky and Wibble maintain the holiday homes in France and Scotland. And Nippy tends the investment properties." Harry's head spun. Manor? Holiday homes? Investment properties? Just how extensive were his family holdings? "We can go through everything in detail tomorrow," Andromeda promised, seeing his expression. "Today is just for getting settled. The goblins will provide a full accounting of your estate in the coming days." They ate lunch in companionable silence, Harry occasionally glancing around the library in wonder. These were his family's books, his family's home. He had a history, a legacy, one that had been kept from him. After lunch, Mimsy insisted on giving Harry a tour of the cottage. The master suite turned out to be a spacious bedroom with an attached sitting room and private bath. The bed was larger than the Dursleys' entire guest room, piled high with pillows and draped with rich burgundy curtains. A balcony overlooked the garden, where more roses bloomed in a riot of colors. "Your father's parents lived here most of the year," Andromeda explained as they toured. "Your father and mother stayed here occasionally after they married, though they had their own cottage in Godric's Hollow." "Where they died," Harry said quietly. Andromeda nodded. "Yes. That property is still in the Potter estate, though it's been preserved as a memorial rather than maintained as a residence." The tour concluded in a spacious garden room at the back of the cottage, its glass walls and ceiling offering panoramic views of the grounds. Plush seating faced the garden, and a small writing desk was positioned to capture the best of the natural light. Mistress Euphemia would sit here for hours, planning her garden and corresponding with herbologists around the world, Mimsy said proudly. She was developing a variety of rose that would bloom year-round and provide ingredients for healing potions when... The elf's voice faltered. "When dragon pox took her and Master Fleamont." "Dragon pox?" Harry asked. "A magical disease," Andromeda explained. "Particularly dangerous to older witches and wizards. Your grandparents were quite elderly when they had your father, they'd almost given up hope of having a child when James was born. They died shortly before your parents married, as I recall." Harry sank into one of the chairs, trying to absorb everything. A family he'd never known, a history he was only beginning to discover. It was overwhelming, and yet, he felt a connection to this place, to these people he'd never met. "I'd like to learn everything," he said finally, looking up at Andromeda. "About my family, about magic, about why Dumbledore did what he did. Everything." Andromeda nodded, her expression serious. "And so you shall, Harry. But remember, knowledge is power only when wielded carefully. Some of what you learn may be difficult to hear." Harry thought about the cupboard under the stairs, about the bindings that had suppressed his magic, about the lies he'd been told his entire life. "I've handled difficult things before," he said, a new determination in his voice. "I can handle the truth." Andromeda studied him for a moment, then smiled. "Yes, I believe you can. We'll begin tomorrow with your first lessons. For now, rest and explore your new home. You've had quite an extraordinary few days." As the afternoon faded into evening, Harry wandered the cottage, examining photographs, opening drawers, running his fingers over furniture that his family had once used. In a desk in what had apparently been his father's childhood bedroom, he found a collection of toy brooms and miniature Quidditch players that zoomed around on their own when activated. In another drawer, a stack of parchment covered in a messy adolescent hand, his father's school notes, filled with doodles of Quidditch plays and what appeared to be prank ideas. Dinner was served in a cozy breakfast nook off the kitchen, where Mimsy proudly presented a feast that made Harry's eyes widen. Roast chicken, potatoes, vegetables prepared in ways he'd never seen before, and for dessert, treacle tart that made him close his eyes in bliss at the first bite. Mistress Lily mentioned once that Master Harry had enjoyed his treacle tart as a baby, Mimsy explained, practically bouncing with pleasure at Harry's reaction. Mimsy remembered. That night, as Harry lay in a bed softer than anything he'd ever imagined, staring up at the canopy above him, the enormity of the change in his life finally hit him. 2 days ago, he had been Harry Potter, unwanted burden of the Dursleys, sleeping in a cupboard, wearing his cousin's cast-offs, starved for affection and knowledge alike. Now he was Harry Potter, emancipated wizard, heir to an ancient family, owner of multiple properties, with wealth, magic, and most precious of all, a connection to his parents. His hand drifted to the air ring on his finger, its weight still unfamiliar but comforting. Whatever came next, learning magic, confronting Dumbledore, finding his place in the wizarding world, he would face it not as the beaten-down boy from the cupboard, but as the Potter heir. As his parents' son. And that made all the difference. The next morning brought sunshine streaming through the windows of the master suite, birds singing in the garden below, and the gentle pop of Mimsy appearing with a breakfast tray. "Good morning, Master Harry," she chirped. "Mimsy has brought breakfast, and Madame Tonks is asking if Master would be ready for his first lessons at 9 o'clock. Harry sat up, reaching for his new glasses on the bedside table. Unlike the broken pair held together with tape that he'd worn at the Dursleys, these were properly fitted, with thin gold frames that Andromeda had insisted suited his face. "That sounds perfect, Mimsy, thank you," he replied, still marveling at the luxury of breakfast in bed. The tray held eggs, toast, bacon, fruit, and a pot of hot chocolate that smelled divine. "Is there anything I should do to prepare?" "Mimsy has laid out clothes in the dressing room," the elf said, gesturing to a door Harry hadn't explored the previous night. "And Madame Tonks said to bring the books you purchased yesterday to the library." Harry nodded, already digging into his breakfast. After 8 years of cooking meals he wasn't allowed to properly enjoy, eating well was a novelty he doubted would fade anytime soon. The dressing room turned out to be a walk-in closet larger than the Dursleys' entire bathroom. Mimsy had arranged his new clothes, still modest in quantity but of far better quality than anything he'd ever owned, on hangers and in drawers. Harry selected a pair of jeans, a green shirt that Andromeda had said matched his eyes, and a light jumper for the morning chill. At precisely 9 o'clock, Harry entered the library to find Andromeda already seated at the large desk, several books and rolls of parchment laid out before her. "Good morning, Harry," she greeted him. "I hope you slept well." "Better than ever," Harry replied honestly, taking a seat across from her. "What will we be learning first?" Andromeda smiled at his enthusiasm. "Before we begin specific magical subjects, I think we need to establish some foundations. Today we'll cover 3 essential areas: wizarding culture and customs, the current political landscape, and an assessment of your current magical abilities now that the bindings have been removed." She pushed a slim volume across the desk. "This is Traditions and Protocol of Ancient Magical Houses by Cantankerous Knot. While the author is, rather traditional in his views, the book provides an excellent overview of how old wizarding families operate. As the last Potter and a head of house despite your age, understanding these traditions will be crucial. Harry accepted the book, noting its worn leather cover and gilt-edged pages. The goblins mentioned that Potter was an ancient and noble house. What exactly does that mean? The wizarding world, particularly in Britain, operates on a quasi-feudal structure, Andromeda explained. The oldest families, those that can trace their magical lineage back at least 7 centuries, are considered ancient. Those that have held seats on the Wizengamot, our legislative and judicial body, for at least 4 centuries are noble. The Potters qualify as both, making yours one of the most prestigious houses in Britain. Harry frowned. So it's all about blood purity. Like, magical racism? Andromeda's expression softened. It can be, for some. My birth family, the Blacks, were notorious blood purists. I was disowned for marrying Ted, a Muggle-born wizard. But the Potter family has historically taken a different stance. Your father married a Muggle-born witch, your mother, and the Potters have generally championed progressive policies in the Wizengamot. Then why does any of this matter? Harry asked, gesturing at the book. If it's just about prejudice, because, Andromeda interrupted gently, understanding a system, even a flawed one, is the first step to navigating it effectively. And eventually, perhaps, changing it. Your status as the Potter heir gives you certain rights, privileges, and responsibilities in our world. Ignoring them won't make them disappear. Harry considered this, then nodded slowly. I see your point. So I need to learn the rules before I can break them properly. Andromeda's lips twitched in amusement. Your father would have put it exactly that way, I think. Yes, that's precisely it. She handed him a second book, this one newer looking. This is Modern Magical Government, Structure and Function by Griselda Marchbanks. It will give you a clearer picture of how our world is governed today. For the next 2 hours, Andromeda guided Harry through a crash course in wizarding politics. He learned about the Wizengamot, the Minister for Magic, the department heads, and the International Confederation of Wizards. He discovered the complex web of alliances between the old families, the rising influence of the more progressive elements led by Muggle-born and half-blood witches and wizards, and the lingering tensions from the war against Voldemort. Which brings us to Albus Dumbledore, Andromeda said, her expression turning serious. Understanding his position is essential to comprehending why his actions regarding you are so significant, and so concerning. She conjured a diagram in midair with a wave of her wand, showing interconnected circles of influence. Dumbledore simultaneously holds 3 positions of immense power: headmaster of Hogwarts, giving him influence over the education and development of nearly every young witch and wizard in Britain, chief warlock of the Wizengamot, presiding over our highest court and legislative body, and supreme mugwump of the International Confederation of Wizards, representing Britain on the global magical stage. Harry stared at the diagram, the full implications sinking in. So when he decided to put bindings on me and leave me with the Dursleys, he did so from a position of almost unassailable authority, Andromeda confirmed. Few would question Albus Dumbledore's decisions, particularly regarding the boy who lived. The what? Andromeda's eyebrows rose. You don't know, of course, you wouldn't. She sighed. Harry, in the wizarding world, you're famous. When Voldemort attacked your family that night, he killed your parents with the killing curse, a spell that's considered unblockable. Then he cast the same curse at you, a 15-month-old baby, and somehow, it rebounded. It destroyed Voldemort, left you with that scar, and ended a war that had claimed hundreds of lives. You're known as the boy who lived, the only person ever to survive the killing curse. Harry's mind reeled. I'm famous. For something I don't even remember. Something my parents probably did to protect me. Precisely, Andromeda said softly. And that fame, combined with your status as the Potter heir, makes you incredibly significant in our world. Which makes Dumbledore's actions all the more troubling. He wanted to control me, Harry said, the pieces falling into place. Because of what I represent. That's our working theory, yes. The question is why, and to what end? Albus Dumbledore has been considered the greatest champion of light magic for decades. His defeat of the dark wizard Grindelwald in 1945 cemented his reputation as a force for good. And yet he put compulsion spells on a baby, blocked most of my magic, and left me with people who hated me and kept me in a cupboard, Harry finished, a cold anger settling in his chest. Not exactly the actions of a good guy. Indeed. Andromeda regarded him thoughtfully. Which brings us to the third part of today's lesson, assessing your magic now that those bindings have been removed. She stood and led him to a clear space in the center of the library. The magical core of a child typically develops gradually, with accidental magic occurring in moments of strong emotion. By 11, when children receive their first wands and begin formal education, their cores have stabilized enough for structured learning. But mine was bound, Harry said. Yes. And now, at 8, your unbound core is likely equivalent to that of a much older child, possibly even a teenager. The bindings have been creating pressure, like a dam holding back water. Now that dam has broken, and we need to see what we're dealing with. Andromeda removed a slender wooden box from her robes and opened it to reveal a wand. This is my spare wand. It won't be a perfect match for you. A properly matched wand is essential for advanced magic, but it will serve for testing purposes. Harry accepted the wand reverently. It was smooth, dark wood, slightly longer than his forearm. The moment his fingers closed around it, he felt a rush of warmth, not as powerful as the surge during the Emancipation ritual, but noticeable. Not a terrible match, Andromeda observed. Now, the simplest charm is Lumos, it creates light at the tip of your wand. The incantation is Lumos, pronounced L-O-M-O-S, with the emphasis on the first syllable. The wand movement is a simple upward flick. To extinguish the light, the countercharm is Nox. Harry nodded, concentrating on the wand in his hand. Lumos, he said clearly, flicking the wand upward. The tip of the wand didn't just light up, it blazed like a miniature sun, so bright that both Harry and Andromeda had to shield their eyes. Nox. Andromeda said quickly, reaching over to tap Harry's wand. The light extinguished immediately. Well, she said, blinking spots from her vision, I think that answers the question about your magical strength. Sorry, Harry said, embarrassed. I didn't mean to, no apologies necessary, Andromeda assured him. Magic responds to intent and emotion as much as to the technical aspects of spellcasting. You wanted light, and your unbound magic provided it, enthusiastically. This is precisely why we need to work on control before anything else. For the next hour, Andromeda guided Harry through basic exercises in magical control, visualizing his magic as a flow he could adjust, practicing the Lumos charm at varying intensities, and learning to feel the difference between casting with full power and casting with restraint. By lunchtime, Harry was mentally exhausted but exhilarated. He could produce light, levitate a feather, though his first attempt had sent it crashing into the ceiling, and had managed a simple color-changing charm on a handkerchief, turning it from white to a vibrant, if uneven, blue. You're progressing remarkably well, Andromeda told him as they ate lunch in the garden room. Most children would take weeks to achieve what you've done in a morning. It feels right, Harry tried to explain. Like my magic is eager to be used after being locked away for so long. A apt description, Andromeda nodded. This afternoon, I thought we might take a different approach to your education. There are some items in the Potter Vault that Griphook suggested might be particularly valuable to you at this stage. Harry perked up. What kind of items? Family journals, primarily. Your mother was known to keep detailed notes on her magical research, and your father and his friends developed quite a reputation for magical innovation, despite their penchant for using it for mischief. My dad was a prankster? Harry asked, fascinated by this new glimpse of his father. Quite infamous for it, Andromeda confirmed with a small smile. He and his friends called themselves the Marauders. They were brilliant, creative, and according to my cousin Sirius, absolutely incorrigible. Your cousin knew my dad. A shadow passed over Andromeda's face. Yes. Sirius Black was your father's best friend. They were like brothers. He was your godfather, actually. Harry set down his fork. Was? Andromeda sighed. Sirius is in Azkaban, the wizard prison. After your parents were killed, something happened. The official story is that he betrayed your parents to Voldemort, then murdered another of their friends, Peter Pettigrew, along with 12 Muggles. You don't believe it, Harry said, observing her carefully. I find it difficult to reconcile with the Sirius I knew, Andromeda admitted. But he was sentenced without a trial, in the chaos following Voldemort's defeat. The evidence seemed overwhelming at the time. Harry processed this information silently. Another piece of his parents' story, another connection lost. We can discuss Sirius more another time, Andromeda said gently. For now, let's focus on what we can learn from your parents' own words. After lunch, we'll make a trip to Gringotts. The trip to Diagon Alley was Harry's first using Floo travel, a disorienting experience that left him sprawled on the floor of the leaky cauldron, covered in soot and thoroughly embarrassed. Andromeda helped him up with a sympathetic smile. Everyone falls their first time, she assured him, casting a quick cleaning charm that removed most of the evidence of his ungraceful arrival. You'll get the hang of it. They made their way to Gringotts, Harry now wearing a hooded cloak that obscured his distinctive features. His fame, as Andromeda had explained, made anonymity a necessity for now. The last thing they needed was the Daily Prophet running headlines about the boy who lived sudden appearance in Diagon Alley. Griphook greeted them in the bank's marble lobby and escorted them directly to a cart that would take them to the Potter family vault. Unlike Harry's trust vault, which he briefly visited the day after his emancipation to withdraw spending money, the family vault was deep beneath the bank, protected by additional security measures. The cart ride was exhilarating, plunging through darkness, taking hairpin turns at breakneck speeds, passing underground lakes and what Harry swore was a burst of flame from some unseen creature. When they finally stopped, they were before an imposing vault door emblazoned with the Potter crest. Place your hand on the door, Mr. Potter, Griphook instructed. The vault will recognize your magical signature and the air ring. Harry did as instructed. The door seemed to warm beneath his palm, and then with a series of clicks and the grinding of unseen mechanisms, it swung open to reveal a chamber that took Harry's breath away. The Potter family vault was the size of the Great Hall at Hogwarts, though Harry wouldn't make that comparison until years later. Piles of gold, silver, and bronze coins formed small mountains in one section. Shelves lined with books, scrolls, and artifacts covered entire walls. Display cases held jewelry, weapons, and magical devices Harry couldn't begin to identify. Furniture, paintings, trunks, and countless other family heirlooms filled the remaining space. Your inheritance, Mr. Potter, Griphook said with a slight bow. The accumulated wealth and treasures of the Potter line. Harry stood frozen at the threshold, overwhelmed. This was his family's legacy, tangible proof of their existence, their history. We're looking specifically for journals today, Andromeda reminded him gently. Personal writings of your parents. Griphook led them to a section of the vault where several trunks were neatly arranged. These contain the personal effects of James and Lily Potter, retrieved from Godric's Hollow after that night. Director Ragnarok had them secured here rather than leaving them to the Ministry's care. The first trunk bore a simple brass plate with LEP engraved upon it, Lily Evans Potter. With trembling hands, Harry released the latches and lifted the lid. Inside, carefully organized, were his mother's possessions, robes and Muggle clothing, books with extensive margin notes in a neat, precise hand, a jewelry box containing a few modest pieces, photographs in frames, and several leather-bound journals with dates spanning from her Hogwarts years through 1981. Harry lifted one of the journals, dated 1979 to 1980. The year before he was born. He opened it carefully, as though the pages might crumble beneath his touch, and found himself looking at his mother's handwriting, elegant, slanted, with small drawings occasionally decorating the margins. January 15, 1980, the Fidelius research is progressing, though more slowly than I'd like. The charm itself is ancient but poorly documented. James thinks I'm being obsessive, but with the prophecy hanging over us, I can't help but feel we'll need every protection possible for our child. Our son, according to Bathilda's scrying, though I'm taking that with a grain of salt. Divination has never been my strong suit. Speaking of protection, I've been researching old blood magic rituals. Not dark, precisely, but certainly not taught at Hogwarts. Petunia would have a fit if she knew I was exploring that unnaturalness to such depths, but she hasn't replied to my letters in months anyway. Harry looked up from the journal, his throat tight. She was researching ways to protect me. Before I was even born. Andromeda nodded. Your mother was brilliant, Harry. One of the most talented witches of her generation. If anyone could find a way to protect her child from Voldemort, it would have been Lily Potter. Harry reverently placed the journal into a satchel Andromeda had brought for this purpose. He selected several others, the earliest from his mother's Hogwarts days, the most recent from 1981. Then he turned to his father's trunk, marked with JFP. James Potter's possessions were more haphazardly arranged: Quidditch gear, robes, what appeared to be an invisibility cloak of remarkable quality, several leather-bound journals, and a small wooden box marked Marauder's Notes, Private, This Means You, Wormtail. Opening the box, Harry found dozens of folded parchments covered in multiple handwritings, detailing spells, potion modifications, and complex magical theory interspersed with what were clearly elaborate prank plans. One sheet outlined something called the Marauder's Map, though the map itself wasn't present. Your father and his friends were exceptionally talented, Andromeda commented, looking over Harry's shoulder. They became animagi during their school years, wizards who can transform into animals at will. A feat most adult wizards never accomplish. Harry added the box of notes and several of his father's journals to the satchel, along with the invisibility cloak. As he was about to close the trunk, he noticed a small, sealed envelope at the bottom, addressed simply, to Harry, if. With a pounding heart, Harry broke the seal and withdrew a letter written in a strong, masculine hand, October 31, 1981. Dear Harry, if you're reading this, then the worst has happened, and your mother and I are no longer with you. I've been adding to this letter periodically since you were born, hoping it would never be needed, but planning for the possibility nonetheless. First and foremost, know that you were loved, fiercely, completely, and without reservation. From the moment we knew you were coming, you were the center of our world. Your mother's face when she first held you. I've never seen such perfect joy. You are our miracle, Harry, and no matter what has happened to us, that will never change. Second, if you're reading this letter as a child and I'm not there to guide you, there are things you must know. Trust Sirius Black with your life. He's your godfather, my brother in all but blood, and he would die before letting harm come to you. The plan is for him to raise you if something happens to us. Be wary of Albus Dumbledore. I write this with great reluctance, as he has been a mentor and leader I've respected deeply. But his vision of the greater good sometimes blinds him to the costs of his grand plans. When it comes to the prophecy about you, Lily and I have seen glimpses of his willingness to sacrifice the few for the many. You must not become a pawn in his chess game. The Potter legacy is yours. Our family has always stood for justice, progress, and the protection of those who cannot protect themselves. The wealth, the properties, the titles, they're tools to help you fulfill that legacy in your own way. Finally, and most importantly, live, Harry. Not just survive, live. Find joy. Make mischief. Fall in love. These dark times will pass, as they always do. With all my love, Dad, James Potter, P.S. Your mother would want me to add, study hard, respect your teachers, except when they're wrong, and remember that magic is neither good nor evil, it's the intention behind it that matters. Harry read the letter twice more, tears falling freely. His father had written this the very day he died, never knowing that within hours he would be facing Voldemort, that Harry would be sent not to his godfather but to the Dursleys, that Dumbledore would indeed use Harry as a pawn. He knew, Harry whispered. He was worried about Dumbledore even then. Andromeda, who had respectfully stepped away to give Harry privacy, returned to his side. "May I?" she asked gently, indicating the letter. Harry nodded, handing it to her. As she read, her expression grew increasingly troubled. "This changes things," she said finally. "James Potter explicitly expressing distrust of Albus Dumbledore, especially regarding his handling of you and a prophecy. This is significant, Harry." "What prophecy?" Harry asked, suddenly alert. "He mentioned it twice, my mom did too, in her journal." Andromeda frowned. "I don't know the details, but there were rumors toward the end of the war, whispers of a prophecy that had sent Voldemort hunting specifically for certain children born in the summer of 1980. You would have been one of them. And Dumbledore knows this prophecy? If it exists, then yes, almost certainly. As Chief Warlock, he would have access to the Hall of Prophecies in the Department of Mysteries." Harry carefully folded his father's letter and placed it in an inner pocket of his cloak, close to his heart. "I want to know what it says. I have a right to know." "You do," Andromeda agreed. "But accessing the Hall of Prophecies is no simple matter. It's one of the most secure locations in magical Britain. Only those named in a prophecy can retrieve it from the shelves." "Then I'll have to go myself, eventually," Harry said with determination. "But first, I need to learn. To prepare." They selected a few additional items from the vault, a set of self-updating books on wizarding law that had belonged to Harry's grandfather, a collection of defensive magic texts, and a small golden snitch that, according to a note attached to it, had been James Potter's first tournament win as Seeker. As they prepared to leave, Harry noticed a jewelry case he hadn't explored. Opening it, he found family rings, necklaces, and other heirlooms. One item caught his eye, a simple gold chain bearing a pendant in the shape of a lily flower, crafted from what appeared to be white gold with tiny emeralds forming the leaves. "Your father gave that to your mother when you were born," Griphook commented, noticing Harry's interest. "It contains protective enchantments, quite powerful ones." Harry carefully lifted the necklace and placed it in his pocket alongside his father's letter. Not to wear, not yet, but to keep close, as a tangible connection to the mother who had loved him enough to research ancient magic to keep him safe. Their return to Rose Cottage was quieter than the journey to Gringotts had been. Harry was lost in thought, processing the revelations from his parents' own words. The knowledge that they had loved him, had been preparing to protect him, had even been wary of the very man who would later control Harry's life so completely, it was both comforting and painful. That evening, after dinner, Harry settled in the library with his parents' journals. He started with his mother's earliest one, from her first year at Hogwarts. Her wonder at discovering the magical world, her determination to excel despite prejudice against her Muggle background, her complicated relationship with a boy named Severus Snape, it was like getting to know her one page at a time. "You should rest," Andromeda advised gently, finding him still reading well past midnight. "The journals will still be here tomorrow." "I know," Harry said, reluctantly marking his place. It's like hearing their voices for the first time. I don't want to stop." Andromeda smiled sadly. "I understand. But you have time now, Harry. Time to get to know them through their words, their possessions, their legacy. It doesn't all have to happen tonight." Harry nodded, knowing she was right. As he prepared for bed, he placed his father's letter and his mother's necklace on the bedside table, where he could see them first thing in the morning. Tangible proof that Harry Potter had been loved, had been wanted, had been someone's miracle. It was more than he'd ever had before. The next 2 weeks fell into a comfortable routine. Mornings were dedicated to magical theory and practice with Andromeda, who proved to be a patient but demanding teacher. Harry learned basic charms, simple transfiguration, the foundations of defensive magic, and the principles of potion making, though the actual brewing would wait until a proper lab could be set up. Afternoons varied, sometimes continued magical practice, sometimes lessons in wizarding culture and politics, sometimes exploration of the Potter family history through the journals and books from the vault. On Saturdays, Andromeda's husband Ted and their daughter Nymphadora, who insisted Harry call her Tonks on pain of hexing, joined them at Rose Cottage. Ted Tonks was a jovial man with a ready laugh and a talent for explaining magical concepts in relatable terms. As a Muggle-born wizard who had married into a traditionally dark pure-blood family, he offered Harry a unique perspective on wizarding society. The trick, Ted told Harry one afternoon as they played wizard chess in the garden, is to respect the traditions without being imprisoned by them. Take the good bits, the rituals that actually enhance your magic, the customs that promote family bonds, and discard the rubbish about blood purity and inherent superiority. Tonks, who at 16 was home for the summer from Hogwarts, was a revelation to Harry. A metamorphmagus, able to change her appearance at will, she kept her hair a vibrant pink and entertained Harry by transforming her features into animal snouts, celebrity impersonations, and once, memorably, a perfect copy of Mimsy the house elf, who had been scandalized and delighted in equal measure. Watch her, Harry, she'd greet him each Saturday, usually managing to trip over something within minutes of arrival. Ready to see what trouble we can get into today? Despite her clumsiness, Tonks was remarkably talented magically and generous with her knowledge. She showed Harry simple dueling stances, taught him minor jinxes that'll come in handy at Hogwarts, and regaled him with tales of the school he would eventually attend. Hufflepuff's the best house, no matter what anyone says, she insisted. Loyalty and hard work over brains or ambition any day. Though you're probably Gryffindor material like your parents were. All that bravery and charging ahead without looking. Harry treasured these glimpses into the school his parents had attended, the place where they had met, fallen in love, and formed the friendships that had shaped their lives. Though Hogwarts was still 3 years away for him, assuming he decided to attend, which Andromeda reminded him was his choice now, it felt like an important connection to his family history. As July gave way to August, Harry's magical education progressed at a remarkable pace. With his core unbound and his natural talent enhanced by focused study, he was already performing magic at a level Andromeda estimated to be equivalent to a second-year Hogwarts student. "Your control is impressive," she told him after he successfully transfigured a matchstick not just into a needle, but into a needle with a specific pattern engraved along its length. Most young wizards struggle with the fine details of magic, focusing only on the broader outcome. "It's like painting with my magic," Harry tried to explain. "I can see it in my mind, and then I just guide it to make what I see." Andromeda exchanged a look with Ted, who had been observing the lesson. "That's a rare approach, Harry. Most wizards think of spells as specific instructions, say these words, move your wand this way, get this result. What you're describing is closer to how wandless magic works in more advanced practitioners." "Is that good?" Harry asked, uncertain. "It's different," Ted clarified. "And potentially very powerful, if you develop it properly." Harry absorbed this information thoughtfully. His approach to magic had been intuitive from the start, less about memorizing incantations and more about understanding the underlying intention and directing his magic accordingly. The wand and words helped focus his intent, but they didn't feel like the true source of the magic. In addition to his magical studies, Harry was gradually learning about his position in wizarding society. Griphook visited weekly with updates on the Potter estate management and to provide lessons in finance and wizarding law. Harry discovered that beyond the vaults of gold, the Potter family held significant investments in both magical and Muggle businesses, owned properties throughout Britain and several in Europe, and held partial ownership in multiple shops in Diagon Alley. "Your grandfather Fleamont made a fortune with his invention of Sleek Easy's hair potion," Griphook explained during one session. "He sold the company before his retirement but retained a 15% ownership stake, which continues to generate substantial revenue." The extent of his wealth was almost embarrassing to Harry, who had spent 8 years wearing Dudley's cast-offs and being told he was a burden. But Andromeda impressed upon him that the Potter wealth represented not just money, but responsibility. Your family has traditionally used its resources to influence wizarding society for the better, she told him. Funding St. Mungo's Hospital, supporting educational reforms, backing progressive legislation in the Wizengamot. Wealth is a tool, Harry, one you can use to continue that legacy. By mid-August, Harry had settled comfortably into his new life. Rose Cottage felt like home in a way Privet Drive never had. His magic flowed freely, growing stronger and more controlled with each passing day. The journals of his parents had given him a connection to his family he'd never dreamed possible. But the outside world couldn't be kept at bay forever. The first sign of trouble came on a Tuesday morning. Harry was practicing a shield charm in the garden under Andromeda's supervision when Mimsy appeared with a soft pop. "Madame Tonks," the elf said urgently, "there is being a visitor at the boundary ward line." "An old wizard with a long white beard and, Dumbledore," Andromeda said sharply, immediately signaling Harry to stop his practice. "Is he alone?" "Yes, madam. He is not being able to see the cottage because of the Fidelius, but he is trying to send magic against the wards." Harry's heart raced. Dumbledore had found them, or at least, had found the general area where Rose Cottage stood. Thanks to Griphook's foresight, the property had been placed under a Fidelius charm immediately after Harry took up residence, with Andromeda as the secret keeper. Without her direct revelation, no one could find the cottage, even if they were standing directly in front of it. "We knew this would happen eventually," Andromeda said calmly, though her hand tightened on her wand. "The wards will hold, they're goblin-crafted and tied to the Potter family magic. He cannot enter without an invitation from you, Harry, as the head of house." Harry nodded, trying to project more confidence than he felt. "Should we confront him?" "Not yet," Andromeda decided after a moment's thought. "You've made remarkable progress, but you're not ready to face Albus Dumbledore directly. Let him expend his energy testing the wards. It will tell us something about his intentions." They retreated inside the cottage, where Andromeda activated a special feature of the ward stone in the library. A three-dimensional model of the property appeared above the stone, with a glowing figure at the perimeter, Dumbledore, casting spells against the boundary wards. "Diagnostic spells," Andromeda identified, watching the magical signature of the casting. "He's trying to determine what protections are in place, not break them outright." "That's somewhat reassuring, he's being cautious rather than aggressive." For nearly an hour, they watched as Dumbledore circled the property, casting various spells at the wards. Finally, he appeared to give up, disapparating with a visual distortion in the model. "He'll be back," Andromeda said grimly. "And next time, he might bring reinforcements. We need to accelerate your training, Harry, and perhaps consider bringing in additional allies." "Who?" Harry asked. "Who can we trust against someone as powerful as Dumbledore?" Andromeda's expression was thoughtful. "There are those who operate outside Dumbledore's sphere of influence. My sister Narcissa's husband, Lucius Malfoy, for instance, though his allegiances during the war make him a complicated ally at best. Augusta Longbottom, whose grandson Neville was born the day before you and might have been targeted by the same prophecy. Amelia Bones of the DMLE, who values justice above politics. What about children my age?" Harry asked suddenly. "Dumbledore controls Hogwarts, but he doesn't control who I meet before then, right?" A shrewd observation, Andromeda nodded approvingly. "Building your own network of peers would be valuable. The children who will one day lead their family houses alongside you. Like this Neville you mentioned. And, others?" "Yes. The Longbottoms were traditionally allies of the Potters. The Bones family as well. There are others who might align with your interests, Susan Bones, Hannah Abbott, perhaps even Draco Malfoy, though that would be complicated, given the history." Harry considered this. Friends his own age, the concept was almost foreign after years of Dudley's bullying ensuring no one at school would come near him. But in this new world, with his freedom and his heritage restored, perhaps it was time to build those connections. I'd like to meet them, he decided. Starting with Neville Longbottom. Our families were allies, and if this prophecy involved both of us somehow. A sound decision, Andromeda agreed. I'll reach out to Augusta Longbottom discreetly. But first, we need to deal with the immediate concern. Dumbledore knows something is here, protected beyond his reach. His next step will likely be to send someone he trusts to investigate more thoroughly. She was right. 3 days later, Mimsy reported another visitor at the ward boundary, not Dumbledore this time, but a tall, severe-looking woman with square spectacles and her hair in a tight bun. Professor McGonagall, Andromeda identified from the ward model. Deputy headmistress at Hogwarts and head of Gryffindor House. She taught both of us, actually, Transfiguration. Strict but fair, and utterly loyal to Dumbledore, or so I've always believed. Unlike Dumbledore, McGonagall didn't attempt to probe the wards magically. She simply stood at the boundary, occasionally turning slowly as if hoping to catch a glimpse of something through the Fidelius charm. After about 20 minutes, she removed a sealed letter from her robes and placed it on a nearby stone, secured with what appeared to be a sticking charm. Then she disapparated. A message, Andromeda said. Clever. The wards will allow objects to pass if they contain no harmful magic. Should we retrieve it? I'll go, Andromeda decided. Wait here. She returned a few minutes later with a cream-colored envelope bearing the Hogwarts crest, a shield emblazoned with a lion, eagle, badger, and snake surrounding a large letter H. It's addressed to you, she said, handing it to Harry after checking it for spells. A standard Hogwarts letter, 3 years early. Harry broke the seal and removed the parchment inside. Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry Headmaster, Albus Dumbledore, Order of Merlin, First Class, Grand Source, CHF. Warlock, Supreme Mugwump, International Confide, of Wizards, Dear Mr. Potter, we are aware that you have left your aunt and uncle's home and are concerned for your safety and well-being. While Hogwarts letters are typically sent to children approaching their 11th birthday, these extraordinary circumstances prompt me to reach out to you directly. Please know that arrangements can be made for your early admission to Hogwarts, where you will be safe, well cared for, and can begin your magical education immediately. Professor Dumbledore has assured the Board of Governors that special accommodations for a student your age are entirely possible. If you are reading this, please respond with your location so that we may send someone to escort you safely to the school. Your parents would want you to be protected during these formative years. Yours sincerely, Minerva McGonagall. Deputy Headmistress Harry read the letter twice, then handed it to Andromeda. They're trying to lure me out, he said flatly. Yes, Andromeda agreed, skimming the contents. Though I believe Professor McGonagall's concern is genuine. She likely doesn't know about the bindings Dumbledore placed on you or the conditions at the Dursleys. She's acting on what she's been told by a man she trusts implicitly. Should I respond? Andromeda considered the question carefully. A complete lack of response will only increase their efforts to find you. But any communication risks revealing too much. Perhaps, a limited response. Enough to indicate you're safe without disclosing your location or circumstances. Harry nodded, moving to the writing desk. After several drafts, he settled on a brief message. Professor McGonagall, thank you for your concern. I am safe, well cared for, and receiving appropriate magical education. While I appreciate the offer of early admission to Hogwarts, I have made alternative arrangements for the present time. I look forward to potentially attending Hogwarts when I turn 11, as is traditional. Respectfully, Harry Potter, heir of the ancient and noble House of Potter. The addition of his formal title had been Andromeda's suggestion, a subtle reminder of Harry's status and the autonomy it granted him. This should suffice, she approved after reading the final version. Polite but firm, providing minimal information while making it clear you're exercising your rights as an emancipated minor and head of house. Mimsy can deliver it to the Hogwarts Olori directly. House elf magic will bypass most tracking attempts. The response to Harry's letter came swiftly, not from McGonagall, but from Dumbledore himself. The envelope bore the same Hogwarts crest, but the handwriting was different, slanted, flowing script in purple ink. Dear Harry, your message to Professor McGonagall has eased some of our immediate concerns for your physical safety, but I must express my deep worry about the circumstances of your departure from your family's home. The protection afforded to you by living with your mother's blood relation was significant and carefully constructed. By leaving that protection, you have exposed yourself to potential dangers you may not fully comprehend. Lord Voldemort's followers, though diminished, have not all been captured or reformed. Whatever disagreements may have existed between you and your relatives, I urge you to consider returning to their care, at least until you are of age to attend Hogwarts. The blood wards at Privet Drive offer protections that cannot be easily replicated elsewhere. If you are unwilling to return, I would welcome the opportunity to meet with you personally to discuss your situation and ensure that your current arrangements are truly in your best interest. As your magical guardian, I have both a legal responsibility and a personal commitment to your welfare. Please respond at your earliest convenience so that we might resolve this situation amicably. With concern and hope, Albus Dumbledore, Headmaster, Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. Harry's hands trembled with anger as he read the letter. My magical guardian. After what he did to me. And he wants me to go back to the Dursleys. He doesn't know that you know about the bindings, Andromeda reminded him. Nor that you've been legally emancipated. He's operating under the assumption that you're a runaway child who somehow found refuge with someone magical. Should we tell him about the emancipation? Not yet, Andromeda advised. Knowledge is power, Harry. The longer Dumbledore remains unaware of exactly what you know and what steps you've taken, the more advantage you retain. Harry considered this, then nodded. So another vague response? I think no response might be better at this stage, Andromeda said thoughtfully. You've established that you're safe. Continuing the correspondence only gives him opportunities to gather more information. Won't he just keep searching? Undoubtedly. But the Fidelius will protect Rose Cottage, and we can take precautions when you need to leave the property. Meanwhile, we continue your education and begin building your network of allies. True to her word, Andromeda arranged a meeting with Augusta Longbottom and her grandson Neville for the following weekend. The meeting would take place at Rose Cottage. Augusta would be given the secret only after taking a magical vow of confidentiality. Madame Longbottom is formidable, Andromeda warned Harry as they prepared for the visit. Traditional in many ways, but fiercely protective of her grandson. Her son Frank and daughter-in-law Alice were Aurors, magical law enforcement, who were tortured into insanity by Death Eaters shortly after your parents' deaths. She's raised Neville since he was barely over a year old. Harry felt an immediate connection to Neville's situation, another boy orphaned by the war, raised by relatives, though it sounded like Augusta, despite her strict nature, was more caring than the Dursleys had ever been. Neville himself is reportedly quite shy, Andromeda continued. There were concerns about his magical ability for some time. His family feared he might be a squib, a non-magical child born to magical parents. Those fears were apparently laid to rest when he showed accidental magic a few years ago, but his confidence may still be affected. Harry nodded, making a mental note to be especially welcoming to the other boy. He knew all too well how it felt to be uncertain of one's place in the world. The Longbottoms arrived precisely at 11 on Saturday morning. Augusta Longbottom swept into the cottage like a general inspecting troops, tall, imposing, wearing formal robes and a hat topped with what appeared to be a stuffed vulture. Behind her, nearly hidden in her shadow, came Neville, a round-faced boy with brown hair and a nervous expression. Herr Potter, Augusta greeted Harry formally after completing her vow of secrecy regarding the cottage's location. Your invitation was unexpected. The Potter and Longbottom families have indeed been allies for generations, but given your unusual upbringing, I had not anticipated you would be aware of such connections. I've been learning about my family's history, Madame Longbottom, Harry replied with the formal bow Andromeda had taught him. And I believe our family's connection may be even more significant than historical alliance. Augusta's eyes narrowed slightly. Indeed. And what has led you to that conclusion? Perhaps we might allow the boys to become acquainted while we discuss certain matters, Augusta, Andromeda suggested smoothly. Neville, Harry has recently established a small greenhouse here at Rose Cottage. Perhaps he could show you. Neville, who had been silent until now, looked up with sudden interest. A greenhouse? What are you growing? Harry, who had indeed started a modest greenhouse project at Andromeda's suggestion that he explore different branches of magic to find his affinities, smiled. Mostly common potion ingredients so far, but there's plenty of space for more. Do you like plants? Neville has quite the gift for herbology, Augusta said, a rare note of pride in her voice. The only subject in which he surpasses his father's aptitude at that age. Neville blushed at this mixed compliment but nodded eagerly. I'd love to see your greenhouse. As the boys headed outside, Harry heard Augusta asking Andromeda in a lowered voice, "Now, what's this about a deeper connection between our families?" The greenhouse was nothing spectacular, a simple glass structure Andromeda had helped Harry conjure, containing a dozen or so common magical plants. But Neville approached it as though it were a rare treasure, examining each plant with careful hands and knowledgeable eyes. Your valerian is stretching a bit, it needs more direct light, he observed, gently turning a pot. And the Dittany would do better with a trellis to climb. But your fluxweed is perfect. I've never managed to grow it this healthy. Harry, who had been following basic instructions from a gardening text, was impressed by Neville's obvious expertise. Would you like to help me improve it? I'm still learning, obviously. Neville's face lit up. Really? You'd want my help? Definitely, Harry said sincerely. It sounds like you know tons more than I do. Maybe we could trade, I could help you with something I'm good at, like defensive spells. Neville's expression fell slightly. Gran says I'm not very good at magic. Nothing like my dad was. I haven't even done much accidental magic. Harry thought about the bindings that had been placed on his own magic. Have you ever been checked for blocks? Magical bindings? Blocks? Neville looked confused. Why would I have those? Harry hesitated, unsure how much to reveal. It's just. I found out recently that someone had put bindings on my magic. They're gone now, but they made it hard for me to access my full ability. Neville's eyes widened. Who would do that? And why? That's what I'm trying to figure out, Harry admitted. But maybe you should ask your grandmother about getting checked. Just to be sure. The conversation shifted to less serious topics after that. Favorite magical creatures. Neville was partial to bowtruckles, while Harry was fascinated by the concept of phoenixes. What they knew about Hogwarts. Neville was nervous about living up to his father's legacy there, and their experiences growing up, though Harry kept his descriptions of the Dursleys vague, not wanting to delve into those painful memories. By the time they returned to the cottage for lunch, a tentative friendship had formed. Neville's initial shyness had given way to animated discussions about plants, and Harry found himself genuinely enjoying the other boys' company. It was his first real friendship with someone his own age. Lunch was served in the garden room, where Augusta and Andromeda appeared to have reached some sort of understanding. Augusta's stern demeanor had softened slightly, and she observed the boys' easy interaction with what seemed like cautious approval. Mr. Potter has been sharing some concerning information about magical bindings and Albus Dumbledore's actions, Augusta said as they ate. Neville, I believe it would be prudent for us to visit Gringotts for a thorough magical examination. Neville looked at Harry in surprise, then back to his grandmother. You think I might have bindings too, Gran? It seems possible, Augusta admitted. Your magical development has been unusual. I had attributed it to other factors, but in light of what we've discussed today. If bindings were placed by the same person, for the same reason. Andromeda began. Then their removal becomes not just a personal matter, but potentially a political one, Augusta finished grimly. The implications are disturbing, to say the least. Harry exchanged a look with Neville, seeing his own uncertainty reflected in the other boy's face. Adults often spoke in these half-sentences around them, hinting at complexities they deemed beyond children's understanding. "If our situations are connected," Harry said firmly, drawing all eyes to him, "then Neville deserves to know everything I know. About the bindings, about Dumbledore, about whatever prophecy might involve us both." Augusta studied Harry intently, as though seeing him properly for the first time. "You are remarkably direct for your age, Herr Potter. A Gryffindor trait, like your father. Or perhaps," Andromeda suggested with a small smile, "simply the trait of someone who has been denied information about his own life for too long." "Indeed." Augusta set down her teacup decisively. "Very well. After Neville has been examined at Gringotts, assuming there are similar findings, we will share all relevant information between our families. A renewal of the Potter-Longbottom alliance, formalized and expanded." "And if there are no bindings?" Harry asked, worried about his new friend either way. "Then we still have ample reason to strengthen our alliance," Augusta stated. The Potter and Longbottom heirs, entering Hogwarts together in 3 years' time, could significantly shift certain political dynamics that have remained stagnant for too long. The visit concluded with plans for another meeting the following weekend, after the Longbottoms' trip to Gringotts. As they prepared to leave, Neville approached Harry somewhat shyly. "Thanks," he said quietly. "For suggesting the check. And for, not thinking I'm just bad at magic." "No one's just bad at magic," Harry replied with conviction. "Magic responds to confidence as much as ability. Once you find what works for you." Neville nodded, a new determination in his expression. "I'll let you know what Gringotts finds. And maybe next time I can bring some cuttings for your greenhouse." "That would be brilliant," Harry grinned. After the Longbottoms departed, Harry turned to Andromeda. "What did you tell Madame Longbottom exactly? She seemed different by the end." "I shared enough to concern her deeply," Andromeda replied. "The fact of your bindings, though not all the details. The circumstances of your placement with the Dursleys. The fact that Dumbledore claimed guardianship he had no legal right to. And yes, the existence of a prophecy that potentially involved both you and Neville. Do you think Neville has bindings too?" Andromeda's expression turned grave. "Based on Augusta's description of his magical development, I would not be at all surprised. If Dumbledore believed the prophecy could apply to either of you, he might have taken similar precautions with Neville." "Precautions," Harry repeated bitterly. "Is that what we're calling it?" "From his perspective, perhaps," Andromeda sighed. "Which makes it no less wrong, but does help us understand his motives. If he truly believes you, or Neville, are destined to face Voldemort again. He wants to control how it happens," Harry finished. "To make sure his weapon works the way he designed it to. A rather apt analogy, I'm afraid." Harry thought about Neville, kind, insecure, passionate about plants, and possibly subjected to the same magical tampering Harry had experienced. His resolution strengthened. "We need more allies," he decided. "Not just the Longbottoms. Other kids our age whose families might support us against Dumbledore if necessary." Andromeda nodded approvingly. "The foundations of a faction of your own, distinct from both Dumbledore's order and the Dark families. Who did you have in mind? You mentioned Susan Bones. And maybe others who aren't aligned with either side?" A sound approach. The Bones family is respected for their neutrality and commitment to justice. Amelia Bones heads the Department of Magical Law Enforcement. Having her sympathetic to your situation could be invaluable. Her niece Susan is your age. Could you arrange a meeting? Like with the Longbottoms? "I can reach out discreetly," Andromeda confirmed. "The same for the Abbotts, perhaps the Greengrasses, families that remained neutral during the war but hold influence in various spheres." As August drew to a close, Harry's world expanded rapidly. The Longbottoms returned with disturbing news. Neville indeed had magical bindings, though fewer than Harry had, restricting approximately 40% of his magical capacity. Their removal, while less dramatic than Harry's had been, resulted in a marked improvement in Neville's confidence and magical ability. Augusta Longbottom, already inclined toward political opposition to Dumbledore due to her belief that he had not done enough to protect her son and daughter-in-law during the war, became firmly committed to the nascent alliance forming around Harry and Neville. In early September, Harry met Susan Bones and her Aunt Amelia, a stern but fair-minded witch who listened to Harry's story with increasing concern. While she insisted on verifying the evidence herself, reviewing the Gringotts records of Harry's bindings and the circumstances of his placement with the Dursleys, she ultimately offered a measured form of support. "I cannot openly oppose Albus Dumbledore without irrefutable proof of wrongdoing that would stand up in the Wizengamot," she told Harry frankly. "His political capital remains substantial, despite the questions raised by your case. However, I can ensure that any attempt to legally force your return to either the Dursleys or his guardianship will face appropriate scrutiny and procedural obstacles." Susan, a friendly, red-haired girl with a practical nature, hit it off immediately with both Harry and Neville. "Auntie always said there was something off about how you disappeared from the wizarding world," she told Harry over cake in the garden room. "Everyone expected the boy who lived to be raised somewhere special, with the best magical education. When no one seemed to know where you were. Your aunt investigated?" Harry asked, surprised. Susan nodded. "She tried. But Dumbledore assured the ministry you were safe and well protected. His word was enough back then, right after the war. No one wanted to question the man who'd helped defeat you-know-who." This pattern repeated with each new family Harry met, initial skepticism giving way to concern as the evidence of Dumbledore's actions mounted. The Abbotts, the Greengrasses, and surprisingly, the Davis family all joined what Neville had begun jokingly referring to as Harry's study group, regular gatherings at Rose Cottage where the children would learn magic together under Andromeda's guidance while the adults discussed political strategies. By October, Harry had something he'd never imagined possible at Privet Drive: friends his own age, a support network of adults who respected his autonomy, and a growing sense of his place in the wizarding world. It was during one of these gatherings that Dumbledore made his next move. The children were in the greenhouse, where Neville was demonstrating the proper way to repot a fanged geranium, when Mimsy appeared with a crack. "Master Harry. There is being visitors at the ward line. Professor Whiskers and a big hairy man." Harry exchanged alarmed glances with the others. Professor Whiskers was Mimsy's nickname for Dumbledore. The big hairy man was new. "Stay here," Harry instructed his friends, though Susan and Daphne Greengrass immediately protested this exclusion. "We're coming with you," Daphne stated flatly, her aristocratic features set in determination. "If Dumbledore's here, you shouldn't face him alone." "We've been practicing defense together for weeks," Susan added. "What's the point if we abandon you the moment there's actual danger?" Harry felt a surge of warmth at their loyalty but shook his head. "It's not about facing danger. The wards will keep him out. But the adults need to know immediately, and someone needs to stay with Hannah and Tracy." Hannah Abbott and Tracy Davis, the newest additions to their group, were less experienced with defensive magic and more nervous about confrontation. Neville nodded in understanding. "I'll stay with them and keep working on the plans. Susan, Daphne, go with Harry to alert the adults. We'll join you if needed." Harry led Susan and Daphne back to the cottage at a run, finding the adults already gathered around the ward stone in the library, observing the magical model of the property. Dumbledore and Hagrid, Andromeda identified, glancing up as the children entered. "Rubeus Hagrid is the keeper of keys and grounds at Hogwarts. Half-giant, completely loyal to Dumbledore. Why bring him?" Augusta Longbottom wondered, her vulture-topped hat bobbing as she studied the model. "If you wanted to appear non-threatening, Hagrid is an odd choice." "Because Hagrid is connected to Harry's past," Amelia Bones said thoughtfully. "According to the records, he was the one who retrieved Harry from Godric's Hollow on Dumbledore's orders after the attack. Perhaps Dumbledore hopes to establish an emotional connection." Harry approached the ward stone, watching as the figures of Dumbledore and the enormous man beside him paced along the boundary. Unlike previous visits, they weren't casting spells against the wards, they were simply waiting. They know we're here, Harry realized. Or at least, they strongly suspect it. They're waiting to be acknowledged. The adults exchanged looks. It may be time for a controlled confrontation, Lord Greengrass suggested. A tall, austere man with the same ice-blue eyes as his daughter, he had been one of the more politically minded additions to their alliance. On our terms, with witnesses present. Harry is not ready to face Dumbledore directly, Andromeda objected. Perhaps he doesn't need to, Augusta countered. We could meet Dumbledore at the ward line, myself, Andromeda, Amelia, and Cyrus. A formidable group representing different political factions, all united in our support of Harry Potter. And send what message? Andromeda asked. That Harry is a child being manipulated by a new set of adults. No, Harry said suddenly, all eyes turning to him. I need to be there. But not alone, and not as a child seeking protection. As the Potter heir, with allies of my choosing. The discussion that followed was intense but brief. Eventually, a plan was formed. Harry, accompanied by Andromeda, Augusta, and Amelia, would meet Dumbledore at the ward boundary. The other adults would remain in the cottage with the children, observing through the ward stone and ready to apparate to the boundary if needed. Harry changed quickly into formal robes bearing the Potter crest, another item retrieved from the family vault. The heir ring gleamed on his finger as he straightened his shoulders, preparing to face the man who had bound his magic and abandoned him to the Dursleys. Remember, Andromeda advised as they approached the ward boundary, Dumbledore is a master legilimens, he can read surface thoughts with eye contact. Keep your shields up as we've practiced. Harry nodded, focusing on the occlumency exercises they'd begun working on after discovering his natural affinity for mind magic. His shields weren't strong enough to completely block a wizard of Dumbledore's caliber, but they might prevent casual intrusion. Dumbledore and Hagrid stood just beyond the ward line, visible now that Harry and his companions had passed through the Fidelius boundary. The headmaster looked exactly as he had in the Daily Prophet photographs Harry had studied, tall, thin, with flowing silver hair and beard, half-moon spectacles perched on a crooked nose, and robes of deep purple decorated with silver stars. His expression was one of benign concern, but his eyes, sharp blue and penetrating, betrayed a more calculating assessment. Hagrid was even more imposing in person than Harry had imagined, towering over Dumbledore by at least 3 feet, with a wild mane of black hair and beard. His expression, unlike Dumbledore's, seemed genuinely emotional at the sight of Harry. Harry Potter, Dumbledore spoke first, his voice warm and grandfatherly. At last. We have been most concerned about your welfare, my boy. Headmaster Dumbledore, Harry replied coolly, stopping several feet from the ward boundary. Your concern is noted, though unnecessary. As I believe Professor McGonagall was informed, I am safe, well cared for, and receiving appropriate magical education. Dumbledore's eyes twinkled, though whether from genuine amusement or calculated effect, Harry couldn't tell. Indeed, and in rather impressive company, I see. Madam Longbottom, Madam Bones, Mrs. Tonks, a pleasure to see you all, unexpected though this gathering may be. Not as unexpected as finding multiple magical bindings on a child in your care, Albus, Augusta said bluntly, cutting through the pleasantries. Or discovering that said child was placed with abusive muggles against his parents' explicit wishes. Dumbledore's expression didn't change, but something in his eyes hardened. I see rumor and speculation have run rather rampant during Harry's absence from his relative's home. Not rumor, headmaster, Harry said firmly. Fact. Documented by the goblins of Gringotts and verified by multiple witnesses. Look at Hagrid interrupted, his voice choked with emotion. Last time I saw you was just a tiny baby. Carried out of the ruins of your parents' house myself, on Dumbledore's orders. Never thought, that's quite enough, Hagrid, Dumbledore said gently but firmly. This is hardly the time for reminiscences. He turned back to Harry. I understand you may have questions about decisions made on your behalf, Harry. I assure you, everything was done with your safety and best interests at heart. If you would allow me to explain, perhaps somewhere more comfortable than this impromptu meeting at your property boundary. My safely warded property boundary, Harry corrected. And I'm quite comfortable discussing matters here, with my chosen advocates present. Amelia Bones stepped forward slightly. Albus, let's dispense with the diplomatic approach. The facts are these: Harry Potter was placed with his Muggle relatives without proper ministry approval or oversight. His magical guardian, whom you claim to be, placed numerous restrictive bindings on his magic without medical necessity or familial consent. Both actions violate multiple wizarding laws. Laws which are subject to interpretation in extraordinary circumstances, Dumbledore countered smoothly. Harry is not merely any wizard child, he is the boy who lived, target of Voldemort's final attack, and potentially still at risk from those who served the Dark Lord. The measures taken were necessary to ensure his protection. By binding 75% of his magic. Andromeda challenged. By placing compulsion spells to make him compliant and incurious. By leaving him with Muggles who kept him in a cupboard and denied him proper nutrition. What protection required that level of suppression and abuse, Albus? For the first time, Hagrid's expression shifted from emotional to confused. A cupboard? What's this about a cupboard, Professor Dumbledore? Exaggerations and misunderstandings, I'm sure, Dumbledore replied, though his eyes had lost their twinkle entirely. The Dursley household may not have been ideal, but the blood protections there were essential. As for the magical restrictions, they were temporary measures, designed to prevent accidental magic that might have exposed Harry to the wizarding world before he was ready. They were designed to make me easier to control, Harry said, meeting Dumbledore's gaze directly despite the risk of legitimacy. To ensure I'd be grateful to whoever rescued me from that life. To make me malleable to your plans. Something flashed in Dumbledore's eyes, surprise, perhaps, that Harry would speak so boldly, or concern at how much he knew. My only plan, Harry, was to keep you alive and safe until you were old enough to understand the unique circumstances of your position in our world. My position as what? Harry pressed. A symbol? A weapon? The subject of a prophecy? This time, Dumbledore couldn't fully mask his reaction. His eyes widened fractionally, and beside him, Hagrid shifted uncomfortably. I see you've learned a great deal during your time away from your relatives, Dumbledore said carefully. Though I wonder about the sources of your information and whether they have provided appropriate context. The context I care about, Headmaster, is that you made decisions about my life, decisions that caused me years of suffering, without legal authority to do so. My parents will specifically excluded my placement with the Dursleys. It named Sirius Black as my guardian, with Alice Longbottom as the secondary choice. Sirius Black betrayed your parents to Voldemort, Dumbledore replied gravely. And Alice Longbottom was incapacitated shortly after your parents' deaths. The choices were limited and the situation dire. Was that proven in court? Harry asked. Black's betrayal. A moment of silence fell. Amelia Bones's expression sharpened with interest at this line of questioning. The evidence was overwhelming, Dumbledore finally said. But we digress from the immediate concern, your current situation, Harry. While I understand your desire for independence, and even your anger regarding past decisions, the fact remains that you are 8 years old. You require proper guardianship, whether from your blood relatives or a suitable alternative approved by the ministry. My guardianship has been resolved, Harry stated. Though I'm not obligated to share those details with you, given your past abuse of such authority. Abuse is a strong word, my boy, and an accurate one, Augusta interrupted. The Potter heir's legal status has been properly established through goblin ritual and wizarding law. He has chosen his residence and his advisors. The matter is settled, Albus. Dumbledore's expression grew grave. I'm afraid I cannot accept such an arrangement without confirmation from the ministry. A child living independently, even one with Harry's resources, sets a concerning precedent, one that would not exist had you not placed illegal bindings that prompted goblin intervention, Amelia pointed out. The Ministry has been apprised of the situation, Albus. My department has reviewed the relevant documentation and found it in order. Without consulting the chief warlock? Dumbledore's voice held a note of rebuke. Without consulting the very individual whose actions necessitated the review, Amelia corrected. A standard recusal to avoid conflict of interest. Hagrid looked increasingly uncomfortable with the direction of the conversation. Professor, if Harry's being treated well, maybe we should. Your concern is noted, Hagrid, Dumbledore interrupted gently. But there are complexities here that require careful consideration. He turned back to Harry. I will not press the matter further today, Harry. But I hope you will consider meeting with me privately, when you feel ready. There are matters regarding your parents, regarding Voldemort, that you deserve to know, things I alone can share with you. If you're referring to the prophecy, Harry replied, I intend to claim it from the Department of Mysteries myself, as is my right as one of the subjects. Any other information you wish to share can be sent in writing or discussed with all of my advisors present. Dumbledore sighed, a perfect performance of disappointed concern. I see your mind is quite made up for the present. Very well. Should you change your position, my door at Hogwarts is always open to you. He turned to leave, then paused. One last thing, Harry. Your Hogwarts letter will arrive on your 11th birthday, regardless of these disagreements. I do hope you will consider attending. It was your parents' alma mater, after all, and remains the finest magical school in Britain. I'll consider all my options when the time comes, Headmaster, Harry replied neutrally. Good day. Dumbledore nodded to the assembled adults. Ladies. I suspect we shall be seeing more of each other in the Wizengamot soon. With that, he turned and walked away, Hagrid following reluctantly behind. Only when they had disapparated did Harry release the breath he'd been holding. That was intense. You handled yourself admirably, Augusta approved, her stern features softening slightly. Your parents would have been proud. Dumbledore won't give up so easily, Amelia warned. Today was merely a reconnaissance mission for him, assessing what you know, who supports you, how firmly established your position is. His next approach will be more subtle, Andromeda agreed. Likely through intermediaries he believes you might trust, former friends of your parents, teachers you might respect. Harry nodded, understanding the game now. Then we continue as planned. Learning, building alliances, preparing for whatever comes next. Including, Augusta added with grim determination, investigating the matter of Sirius Black. Your question about a trial was well placed, Harry. I sit on the Wizengamot, and I have no recollection of Black ever receiving a formal trial. A concerning oversight, Amelia acknowledged, if true. I'll look into the records personally. As they returned to the cottage, where the others waited anxiously for news of the confrontation, Harry felt strangely energized rather than drained. His first direct encounter with Dumbledore had been tense but productive. He had stood his ground, supported by powerful allies, and made it clear he would not be manipulated or controlled. The road ahead would not be easy. Dumbledore's influence ran deep throughout Wizarding Britain. The mystery of the prophecy and Voldemort's defeat remained to be solved. And somewhere, perhaps, lurked enemies even more dangerous than a manipulative headmaster. But for the first time in his life, Harry Potter wasn't facing these challenges alone. He had friends his own age who stood with him not because of his fame, but because of genuine connection. He had adult allies who respected his autonomy while providing guidance when needed. He had a home where he was valued, not merely tolerated. And most importantly, he had the freedom to forge his own path, unbound by compulsions, unrestricted by artificial limitations on his magic, uninhibited by others' expectations. Whatever came next, Harry would face it on his own terms. As the Potter heir. As his parents' son. As himself. Chapter 3, New beginnings. The winter sun hung low in the clear December sky, casting long shadows across Diagon Alley as Harry Potter made his first planned public appearance in the wizarding world. 3 months had passed since his confrontation with Dumbledore at the ward boundary of Rose Cottage, months filled with intensive magical training, political lessons, and careful preparation for this day. "Remember," Andromeda murmured as they approached Flourish and Blots, where a crowd had already gathered, "this is merely a book signing. You're here as a young wizard interested in defensive magic, not as the boy who lived, making a statement." Harry nodded, adjusting the winter cloak that concealed his formal robes bearing the Potter crest. The hood was pulled up just enough to shadow his features without appearing suspicious, a temporary measure until they were ready for the planned recognition. Beside him walked Neville Longbottom, similarly attired in winter wear over formal robes, his grandmother Augusta a formidable presence at his side. Susan Bones and her Aunt Amelia completed their small party, with Lord Greengrass and his daughter Daphne to join them inside the bookshop as if by coincidence. "Nervous?" Neville asked quietly. "A bit," Harry admitted. In the months of their friendship, he'd learned that honesty with Neville was always repaid with loyalty. Not about the people, exactly. More about getting the timing right. The plan was simple in concept, complex in execution. Famous author and dueling champion Adalbert Waffling was signing copies of his newest book, Practical Defensive Magic for the Modern Wizard. The event had drawn a substantial crowd of Wizarding Britain's most prominent families, making it the perfect venue for Harry's strategic reappearance. Rather than a dramatic announcement, they had planned a more organic revelation. Harry would approach for a signature, hood still up. Augusta would recognize Adalbert from their Wisengamot connections, drawing attention to their group. In the ensuing conversation, Harry's hood would be pushed back, accidentally, revealing his identity to the crowd. What happened next would depend on the public reaction, and on whether Dumbledore had agents present, as they suspected he might. "Almost showtime," Susan whispered as they reached the bookshop's entrance. "Good luck, Harry." Flourish and Blots had been magically expanded to accommodate the event, shelves pushed against walls to create an open space where rows of chairs faced a small stage. Most of the seats were already filled, with additional attendees browsing nearby shelves or conversing in small groups. At the center of it all, seated at a table piled high with books, Adalbert Waffling signed copies with a flourish, exchanging pleasantries with each admirer. Harry recognized several of his newfound allies strategically positioned throughout the room. Lord Abbot and his daughter Hannah browsed defense texts near the stage. Tracy Davis and her father examined a display of advanced charms books to the left. Even Lady Zabini, whose son Blaise had recently joined their study sessions, graced the event with her notorious beauty and sharp wit, drawing a cluster of admirers near the refreshment table. "Ah, the Longbottoms have arrived," came the smooth voice of Lucius Malfoy from nearby. "And with the Bones family, how unexpected." Harry tensed slightly. The Malfoys were a complication in their plans. Draco, the son, had visited Rose Cottage exactly once, invited as part of their outreach to politically influential families. The visit had ended poorly, with Draco's condescending attitude toward Neville and his attempt to establish dominance over the group resulting in a frosty dismissal from Harry himself. "Lucius," Augusta acknowledged with minimal courtesy. "I wasn't aware defensive magic was among your interests." "One must keep abreast of all developments in magical theory," Malfoy replied, his pale eyes sliding to Harry with a calculating gleam. "And one never knows whom one might encounter at such gatherings." Had he recognized Harry already? Or was he simply suspicious of a hooded child in Augusta's company? Before Harry could decide how to react, Amelia Bones smoothly intervened. "I'm surprised the school governors don't keep you too occupied for recreational reading, Lucius. I understand Hogwarts curriculum review is quite demanding this year." As the adults engaged in their verbal fencing, Harry caught sight of Draco Malfoy watching them from beside an elegant blonde woman who could only be his mother. The boy's pointed face betrayed a mixture of curiosity and resentment. "Let's get in line," Harry suggested quietly to Neville and Susan. "Before it gets longer." They maneuvered toward the signing table, where Adalbert Waffling was just finishing with a portly wizard in expensive robes. "Next, please," called the bookshop assistant managing the line. Harry stepped forward, a copy of Practical Defensive Magic clutched in his gloved hands. Waffling looked up with a professional smile that faltered slightly at the sight of the hooded child. "Well, hello there, young man," he said. "Rather advanced reading for someone your age, isn't it?" "I find defensive magic particularly relevant, sir," Harry replied, pitching his voice to carry just far enough for nearby browsers to hear. "Do you indeed?" Waffling's interest seemed genuine now. "And why might that be?" "Because understanding how to protect oneself and others is the foundation of responsible magic," Harry answered, reciting the line they'd prepared, a quote from Waffling's own introduction. The author's eyebrows rose, and his smile warmed considerably. "Well said. Most adults miss that central point. And to whom should I dedicate this copy?" "Harry, sir." "Just Harry." As Waffling bent to sign the book, Augusta executed her part of the plan with perfect timing. "Adalbert Waffling," she exclaimed, approaching the table. "I thought that was you." "Augusta Longbottom, we served on the Education Reform Committee together in '83. Waffling looked up, recognition dawning. "Madam Longbottom, of course. Your contributions to the standardization of safety protocols and practical lessons were invaluable." "You flatter an old woman," Augusta replied with practiced modesty. "I see you've met my grandson Neville and his friends." She gestured to the children, creating a small commotion that drew the attention of nearby patrons. As planned, in the shuffle of introductions, Amelia Bones reached across to shake Waffling's hand, her elbow accidentally knocking back Harry's hood. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, "Merlin's beard," gasped a witch to their right. "Is that, it couldn't be, it's Harry Potter." Someone else exclaimed, and suddenly all conversation in the bookshop ceased. Harry stood perfectly still, feeling dozens of eyes fix upon him. His scar, deliberately left visible by his carefully arranged hair, practically tingled under the collective gaze. Waffling recovered first. "Harry Potter," he said, his voice hushed with awe. "I had no idea. It's an honor, Mr. Potter, truly an honor." "The honor is mine, Mr. Waffling," Harry replied clearly, his voice carrying in the silence. "Your work on defensive theory has been invaluable to my studies." The calculated statement had its intended effect. Whispers erupted throughout the shop. "Studies? But he's not even Hogwarts age. Where has he been all these years? Who's been teaching him? Why is he with the Longbottoms and not his guardians?" The crowd began to press forward, and Harry felt a momentary surge of panic. This was the riskiest part of their plan. The initial public reaction could quickly become overwhelming. Amelia Bones stepped in smoothly. "Please, give the young man some space. This is a book signing, not a press conference." "Indeed," came the cultured voice of Lord Greengrass, who approached with perfect timing. "Perhaps we might all remember our manners and allow Mr. Potter the same courtesy we would expect for our own children." The strategic intervention worked. The crowd reluctantly gave them a little more room, though the excited whispers continued unabated. Waffling, recovering his professional demeanor, signed Harry's book with a flourish. "To Harry Potter," he read aloud as he wrote, "a young wizard who understands the true purpose of defensive magic. May your shields always hold and your counterspells find their mark. Adalbert Waffling." "Thank you, sir," Harry said sincerely, accepting the book. Before he could step away, a flash of light momentarily blinded him. Rita Skeeter, her acid green quill already dancing across a floating notepad, lowered her camera with a predatory smile. "Harry Potter returns to Wizarding Society at last," she announced, as though narrating the headline she'd already composed in her mind. "Tell me, Mr. Potter, where have you been hiding all these years? Why choose today to reveal yourself? And what's this about studies? Are you receiving special education outside of Hogwarts?" This, too, had been anticipated. Andromeda had spent hours coaching Harry on dealing with the press, particularly Rita Skeeter, whose quick quotes quill was notorious for transforming innocuous statements into sensational gossip. "Ms. Skeeter," Harry acknowledged with a polite nod. "I haven't been hiding at all. I've been receiving a proper magical education appropriate to my status as the last Potter, in accordance with my parents' wishes. Today seemed like a good opportunity to meet Mr. Waffling, whose work I admire." The simplicity of the statement left Rita momentarily wrong-footed. She'd clearly expected either a flustered child or an arrogant celebrity. "But surely Headmaster Dumbledore had arrangements for your education," she pressed. "The wizarding world was given to understand you were being prepared for your eventual role at Hogwarts." "I'm not aware of any authority Headmaster Dumbledore holds over my education prior to a Hogwarts attendance that won't even be possible for several years," Harry replied, his tone still polite but cooling noticeably. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I believe others are waiting to meet Mr. Waffling." The crowd's whispers intensified. This exchange, seemingly innocent, had just publicly questioned Dumbledore's long-assumed control over the boy who lived. As Harry moved away from the signing table, flanked by Neville and Susan with the adults forming a protective barrier around them, he became aware of a tall figure in purple robes observing from near the shop entrance. "McGonagall," Neville whispered, having spotted her too. 3:00. Harry nodded slightly, having expected Hogwarts representation. Professor McGonagall's presence rather than Dumbledore himself suggested the headmaster was being cautious after their wardline confrontation. "Mr. Potter," McGonagall called as they approached, her Scottish brogue unmistakable even in those two words. "A moment, if you please." The adults in Harry's party exchanged glances but made no move to prevent the interaction. This, too, had been discussed. Appearing overprotective would undermine their message that Harry was receiving proper guidance while making his own decisions. "Professor McGonagall," Harry greeted her. "I didn't expect to see Hogwarts faculty at a book signing." "I have diverse reading interests," she replied, her expression stern but not unkind. "And when I heard Adalbert would be here, we were colleagues briefly, you know." Her gaze shifted to Augusta. "Madame Longbottom, Miss Bones, Mrs. Tonks. I see Mr. Potter is in varied company today." "The Potter and Longbottom families have a long alliance, Minerva, as you well know," Augusta stated. "As do many of the old families who value proper magical education and traditions." McGonagall's eyes narrowed slightly at the implied criticism. "Indeed. Mr. Potter, the headmaster would very much appreciate the opportunity to speak with you at your convenience. There are matters concerning your parents that, my parents left extensive journals, Professor," Harry interrupted politely but firmly. "Along with letters, photographs, and memories in the family pensieve. I'm learning about them directly through their own words and recollections." McGonagall blinked, clearly taken aback. "I see. Nevertheless, there are aspects of their lives, particularly their final years, that Albus could, if the headmaster has specific information about my parents he wishes to share, he's welcome to send it in writing," Harry said. "Or to meet with me in the presence of my chosen advisors, as I believe I've already indicated." The professor's lips thinned, but before she could respond, the bookshop door opened, admitting a blast of cold air and a familiar enormous figure. "Professor McGonagall." Hagrid called, his booming voice carrying easily through the now crowded shop. "Did ye find?" He stopped abruptly, spotting Harry. "Harry. Ye really are here. Look at ye, all proper in wizard robes and everything." Unlike McGonagall's measured approach, Hagrid's obvious delight seemed entirely genuine. He beamed at Harry through his wild beard, eyes crinkling with happiness. Harry felt a strange twist in his chest. According to his mother's journals, Hagrid had been kind to them during the war, offering the sanctuary of his hut when they visited Hogwarts for order meetings. His obvious affection now seemed untainted by the manipulation that colored Dumbledore's every interaction. "Hello, Mr. Hagrid," Harry replied, allowing some warmth into his voice. "Just Hagrid, everyone calls me Hagrid," the half-giant corrected, still beaming. Last time I saw ya before the ward line, ya were just a tiny thing. Carried ya myself the night, well, that night. Wrapped ya up in my coat and took ya to your aunt and uncle's on Dumbledore's orders. His smile faltered slightly. Though I've been hearing some things since then that don't sit right about that placement. McGonagall's expression tightened in warning. Hagrid, perhaps this isn't the venue for, were you friends with my parents, Hagrid? Harry asked, deliberately redirecting the conversation. Hagrid's face lit up again. That I was. Your dad, James, always getting into mischief with that lot of his, but a good heart, a real good heart. And Lily. Brightest witch of her age, they said, and kind to everyone, even old Hagrid. Used to visit me for tea sometimes, both of them. The simple, heartfelt recollection felt like a gift. Harry had read his parents' journals, seen their photographs, but hearing about them from someone who had genuinely cared for them was different. Perhaps, Augusta intervened smoothly, you might share those memories properly another time, Mr. Hagrid. I'm sure Harry would appreciate hearing about his parents from someone who knew them well. I would, Harry agreed sincerely. Any time. Hagrid exclaimed, clearly delighted by the prospect. Yeah, just let me know when you're free, Harry. I've got photos too, in an album somewhere, could dig it out for ya. Thank you, Harry said. I'd like that. McGonagall, observing this exchange with sharp eyes, seemed to recalculate her approach. It seems you have indeed found support and connection to your heritage, Mr. Potter. I am glad to see it, though I confess the circumstances remain concerning from the school's perspective. My magical education is proceeding excellently, Professor, Harry assured her, sensing an opportunity to emphasize a key message they'd planned to convey. I have tutors in all the core subjects, access to my family's magical library, and regular practice sessions with peers my own age. By the time my Hogwarts letter arrives, I expect to be well prepared for advanced placement. The strategic implication, that Harry was considering Hogwarts but on his terms, was not lost on McGonagall. Her eyebrows rose fractionally. I see. Well, should you or your advisors have questions about the Hogwarts curriculum to ensure proper alignment with your current studies, my door is open. It was a small concession, but a significant one, an acknowledgement of Harry's current educational arrangements as legitimate. Before Harry could respond, a commotion near the signing table drew everyone's attention. Lucius Malfoy, it seemed, had engaged Adalbert waffling in a heated discussion about a passage in his book regarding the classification of certain spells as dark. A convenient political designation, Malfoy was saying, his aristocratic drawl carrying clearly, rather than any meaningful magical distinction. Wouldn't you agree, waffling? Or has the ministry's gold influenced your academic integrity? The author's face flushed with anger. My research stands on its own merits, Malfoy. The distinction between defensive magic and dark arts is not merely political but fundamental to the ethical application of power. Ethics, Malfoy scoffed. Another subjective construct used to limit those with the will and ability to advance magical knowledge. Harry exchanged a glance with Neville. This confrontation hadn't been part of their plan, but it created a perfect opportunity for the next stage, establishing Harry's own political position as distinct from both the traditional dark families like the Malfoys and Dumbledore's progressive faction. With a slight nod to Andromeda, who understood immediately what he intended, Harry stepped forward, moving deliberately into the space between the arguing men. Excuse me, he said, his young voice somehow cutting through the tension. But isn't the distinction really about intent rather than some inherent quality of the magic itself? Both men turned to him in surprise, along with everyone else in the vicinity. My mother's research, Harry continued, grateful for the hours he'd spent poring over Lily Potter's journals, suggested that the separation between light and dark magic is largely artificial, a categorization based on cultural values and historical usage rather than magical essence. What matters is the caster's intent and the effect on both caster and subject. A stunned silence fell. The boy who lived, famously orphaned by the darkest wizard in generations, was suggesting a nuanced view of magic that contradicted both the Ministry's rigid classifications and the blood-purist dogma of families like the Malfoys. Waffling recovered first, scholarly interest overriding his previous anger. Your mother. Lily Potter was researching magical theory at that level? I wasn't aware. She kept detailed journals, Harry replied. Her specialty was charms, but she was exploring the fundamental nature of magic before. He hesitated, then continued firmly, before Voldemort killed her. The collective gasp at his use of the name created a momentary distraction, allowing Harry to observe reactions. Malfoy's face had gone rigid, a muscle twitching in his jaw. McGonagall looked torn between pride and concern. Hagrid was dabbing at his eyes with a handkerchief the size of a tablecloth. A fascinating perspective from someone so young, Malfoy finally said, studying Harry with new calculation in his pale eyes. One wonders what other, unconventional ideas you might have absorbed during your mysterious upbringing, Mr. Potter. Ideas based in research and evidence rather than prejudice or propaganda, Mr. Malfoy, Harry replied evenly. From various sources across magical traditions. The implied rejection of both dark and light dogmatism hung in the air. Before Malfoy could formulate a response, Lord Greengrass stepped smoothly into the conversation. Perhaps this intellectual discussion might continue at the symposium next month, Adalbert. The one hosted by the Magical Theory Association. I'm sure arrangements could be made for Mr. Potter to attend, given his evident interest and family connection to the field. Waffling seized the suggestion eagerly. Capital idea. I'd be fascinated to review Lily Potter's research notes. Her work on charm theory was groundbreaking, but I had no idea she'd ventured into more fundamental magical philosophy. My family would be honored to sponsor Mr. Potter's attendance, Greengrass continued, setting the next stage of their plan in motion. As would, I'm sure, several other families committed to advancing magical knowledge beyond political constraints. The implication was clear, a new faction was forming around Harry Potter, one that transcended the traditional light-dark division of wizarding politics. The whispers that raced through the bookshop confirmed the message had landed precisely as intended. Lucius Malfoy's expression was unreadable, but the slight inclination of his head suggested at minimum a recognition that the political landscape had shifted. Until the symposium, then, he said, before turning with a swirl of his expensive cloak and beckoning to his wife and son. As the Malfoys departed, the crowd began to disperse, breaking into excited conversations about what they'd witnessed. Rita Skeeter, Harry noticed, was scribbling furiously, her enchanted quill practically smoking with effort. Well played, Andromeda murmured as their group began making its way toward the exit. Your mother would be proud of how you used her research to establish your position. It wasn't just strategy, Harry admitted quietly. I meant what I said. Her journals are clear about how arbitrary the classifications are. Which makes it all the more effective, Augusta noted approvingly. The most compelling political statements are those grounded in genuine conviction. Outside, the winter air was crisp and invigorating after the stuffy heat of the crowded bookshop. As they made their way down Diagon Alley, Harry was acutely aware of the stares and whispers that followed them, the occasional finger pointed in his direction, the way conversations halted as they passed. I'd forgotten what it was like, Susan said softly, walking beside Harry. The way everyone reacts to you. It must be uncomfortable. Harry shrugged. It's strange, but not as bad as I expected. At least now it's on my terms, not Dumbledore's. They had planned to conclude the day with a strategic appearance at Florian Fortescue's ice cream parlor, a deliberate choice to remind the wizarding public that despite his political significance, Harry Potter was still a child enjoying normal pleasures. The shop was visible ahead, its charmed windows free of frost despite the winter weather. Before they could reach it, however, a familiar voice called out from behind them. Mr. Potter. A word, if you would be so kind. Harry turned to see Professor McGonagall approaching, Hagrid no longer accompanying her. Her expression was composed but determined. Professor. Harry acknowledged, the adults in his group forming a loose semicircle behind him, present but not interfering. McGonagall glanced at them briefly before addressing Harry directly. "I wish to speak with you apart from the crowd. Your performance back there was impressive, if rather concerning in its implications." "Performance, Professor?" "Come now, Mr. Potter. I taught both your parents for 7 years. I recognize calculated political messaging when I see it, regardless of the age of the messenger." Her tone was crisp but not unkind. "While I appreciate the intellectual foundation you presented, I cannot help but wonder how much of today was your own initiative versus guidance from your advisors." It was a fair question, and one Harry had been prepared for. "My words were my own, Professor McGonagall. The timing of my public appearance was planned with help, yes, but the substance of what I said reflects my actual beliefs and research." "Research conducted at 8 years old?" Her skepticism was evident. "I've had access to my mother's journals for months now," Harry replied. "And I've been studying with tutors in all major magical disciplines. My magical core is fully unbound now, which has accelerated my learning considerably." McGonagall's expression shifted at the mention of bindings, a flicker of something, concern, guilt, crossing her features. "These bindings you reference, you believe Albus placed them?" "They bore his magical signature, according to the goblins who removed them," Harry stated flatly. "Along with compulsion spells designed to make me compliant and dependent on him specifically." The professor paled slightly. "That is a serious accusation." "It's not an accusation, Professor. It's a documented fact, verified by Gringotts ritual magic and witnessed by members of the Wizengamot." Harry held her gaze steadily. "The question isn't whether Headmaster Dumbledore did these things, it's why, and whether those who trusted him were complicit or merely deceived." The directness of the statement clearly shocked McGonagall. For a moment, she seemed at a loss for words. "I don't believe you were complicit," Harry added more gently. "My mother's journals speak highly of you as a teacher and head of house. She trusted you, even if she had growing reservations about the headmaster toward the end." "Lily had concerns about Albus?" McGonagall asked sharply. "And my father," Harry confirmed. "Particularly regarding something called the greater good, and how it related to a prophecy involving me." McGonagall's hand moved unconsciously to her throat. "I was not aware of this." "There's a lot that was kept from many people," Harry said. "That's why I'm being careful now about whom I trust and what information I share." The professor seemed to struggle internally for a moment before straightening her shoulders. "Mr. Potter, while I cannot comment on these allegations without further investigation, I can assure you that whatever my relationship with the headmaster, my primary concern has always been the welfare of my students, past, present, and future. If you would ever wish to discuss your parents or your eventual attendance at Hogwarts, my door remains open to you, independent of Albus's involvement." It was a significant offer, a potential ally within Hogwarts itself, or at minimum, someone willing to consider that Dumbledore might not be infallible. "Thank you, Professor," Harry said sincerely. "I may take you up on that." McGonagall nodded briskly. "Until then, Mr. Potter." She inclined her head to the adults behind him. "Ladies, gentlemen." With that, she turned and walked away, her emerald robes billowing slightly in the winter breeze. "Well," Amelia Bones said when McGonagall was out of earshot, "that was unexpected." "Not entirely," Andromeda countered thoughtfully. "Minerva McGonagall has always valued truth and fairness above all else. If she believes Dumbledore may have misled her or abused his authority, her loyalty would be severely tested." "Another potential ally?" Augusta wondered. "Perhaps," Harry said. "But we should be careful. She's still deputy headmistress, and she's worked with Dumbledore for decades. That kind of loyalty doesn't disappear overnight." The wisdom of the observation, coming from an 8-year-old, momentarily silenced the adults. Harry had changed in the months since his emancipation, grown not just in magical ability but in perception and judgment. The timid boy from the cupboard was fading, replaced by a young wizard beginning to grasp the complexities of the world around him. Ice cream, I think, Andromeda decided, breaking the somber moment. As planned. End the day on a positive note, with images of Harry Potter enjoying a normal childhood pleasure. Florian Fortescue himself served them, practically vibrating with excitement at having the boy who lived in his shop. He insisted that Harry's chocolate and raspberry cone with chopped nuts, your father's favorite whenever he visited with your mother, was on the house, along with everyone else's selections. As they sat at a prominently visible table near the window, Harry caught sight of their reflection in the glass, himself surrounded by friends and allies, enjoying ice cream and conversation like any normal child. It was both truth and carefully crafted image, reality and political statement. This balance would define his life moving forward, he realized. Harry Potter the person and Harry Potter the symbol. The challenge would be maintaining the former while strategically employing the latter. The aftermath of Harry's public debut exceeded even their most optimistic projections. The Daily Prophet's front page the next morning bore the headline, "The Boy Who Lived Returns." Harry Potter emerges with bold new perspective on magic. Rita Skeeter's article, while filled with her typical dramatic flair, was surprisingly accurate in its broad strokes, portraying Harry as intellectually precocious, well supported by an alliance of respected families, and notably independent from Dumbledore's influence. The photograph showed Harry discussing magical theory with Adalbert Waffling, looking every inch the Potter heir in his formal robes, the legendary scar just visible beneath his tousled hair. More significant than the main article was a sidebar speculating on the political implications of what was already being called the Potter Coalition, an alliance transcending traditional light-dark divisions, centered around magical research, educational reform, and cultural preservation without blood-purist ideology. "They've created a narrative for us better than we could have crafted ourselves," Lord Greengrass observed, reading the article over breakfast at Rose Cottage the following morning. The allied families had gathered to assess the public response and plan their next moves. "It helps that it's fundamentally true," Amelia Bones noted. "We are forming a coalition around those principles, with Harry as its symbolic center. The question is how Dumbledore will respond," Augusta said, setting down her teacup with a sharp click. "This directly challenges his political narrative about being Harry's mentor and guardian." As if on cue, Mimsy appeared with the day's mail, which included a cream-colored envelope bearing the Hogwarts seal. The letter inside, written in Dumbledore's distinctive purple ink, was brief but pointed. "Dear Harry, while I am pleased to see you engaging with the wizarding community and developing an interest in magical theory, I must express concern about your public statements regarding the nature of magic. Such complex topics often contain nuances that require mature guidance to navigate safely. I would welcome the opportunity to discuss your mother's research, with which I was familiar during her lifetime, and to provide context that may be missing from even the most detailed journals. There are aspects of Lily's work that intersected with dangers she herself recognized but may not have documented fully. My office at Hogwarts remains open to you, as does my willingness to assist in your magical education in any way appropriate to your age and circumstances. With concern and hope, Albus Dumbledore, Headmaster, Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry, Classic Dumbledore, Andromeda observed after reading the letter aloud. Superficially supportive while undermining Harry's autonomy and implying he lacks the maturity or context to understand his own mother's work. And the subtle warning about dangers is particularly insidious, Augusta added. Planting doubt without specifying any actual threat. Harry read the letter again, feeling a familiar anger kindle in his chest. He's trying to make me doubt myself, and my mother. To make me feel like I need his guidance to understand her properly. A continuation of the pattern established by those compulsion spells, Lord Greengrass agreed. Creating dependency and emotional attachment to him as an authority figure. How should I respond? Harry asked, looking around the table at his advisors. That depends, Amelia said thoughtfully, on what you wish to accomplish. Engaging directly gives him an opening for further correspondence, which may not be desirable. Ignoring it entirely might prompt more assertive approaches. A measured acknowledgement, Lord Greengrass suggested. Formal but minimal, neither inviting further discussion nor displaying obvious hostility. In the end, Harry drafted a short reply: Headmaster Dumbledore, thank you for your interest in my educational progress. My mother's journals are remarkably thorough, including extensive notes on both the theoretical foundations and practical applications of her research. Should specific questions arise that require additional context, I will consult with the appropriate magical experts. Respectfully, Harry Potter, heir of the ancient and noble house of Potter. Perfect, Augusta approved when Harry showed her the draft. Polite but firm, making it clear you have resources beyond him while leaving no opening for continued correspondence on the topic. The letter was sent, and the allied families turned their attention to the next phase of their strategy, consolidating the political narrative established by Harry's public appearance and expanding their coalition's influence. January brought another significant development. Amelia Bones, after months of discreet investigation into Sirius Black's case, presented her findings to their inner circle. There was no trial, she stated grimly, spreading ministry documents across the library table at Rose Cottage. Not even a formal hearing. Black was apprehended at the scene where Peter Pettigrew supposedly died, and transported directly to Azkaban on Barty Crouch's orders, countersigned by Minister Bagnold. Without veritaserum questioning. Without examination of his wand. Augusta demanded, clearly appalled despite her personal dislike of the Black family. Nothing, Amelia confirmed. The file contains an arrest report, transfer documentation to Azkaban, and nothing else. No witness statements beyond initial oral observations, no magical evidence processing, no transcript of any kind. This is highly irregular, Lord Greengrass said carefully. Even during the height of the war, basic judicial procedures were maintained for suspected Death Eaters. Unless someone wanted Black silenced quickly, Andromeda suggested, her expression troubled. My cousin was many things, reckless, arrogant, sometimes cruel in his youth, but his loyalty to James Potter was absolute. I never believed he could have betrayed the Potters, but with the evidence supposedly so overwhelming. Evidence that was never properly examined, Amelia finished. The question is why? And why was there such urgency to imprison him without trial? Harry, who had been listening intently, spoke up. My father's letter said Sirius was my godfather, designated to raise me if anything happened to them. If Dumbledore wanted me placed with the Dursleys instead, he would need Black out of the way, Augusta concluded. A disturbing theory, but one consistent with the facts as we understand them. What can we do? Harry asked. Can we demand a trial now? Amelia sighed. It's complicated. As head of the DMLE, I have the authority to review cases and order new investigations, but after 7 years, and for a case this high profile, we would need irrefutable new evidence, Lord Greengrass stated. Something compelling enough to overcome the political resistance we'd inevitably face. Or leverage, Andromeda suggested. Something Dumbledore or the Ministry wants badly enough to make concessions. The discussion continued into the evening, examining legal precedents and political strategies. In the end, they decided that while justice for Sirius Black would remain a goal, they needed more political capital before making such a contentious move. Instead, they would focus on strengthening the Potter coalition through the upcoming Magical Theory Symposium, where Harry would make his second public appearance. The event, scheduled for late February, would provide a platform to establish their academic and cultural priorities while building alliances with influential researchers and educators. Meanwhile, Harry's magical education continued to advance at a remarkable pace. With his core fully unbound and his natural talent nurtured by excellent tutors, he was already performing magic at a level equivalent to a fourth-year Hogwarts student in many subjects. Defense against the dark arts proved to be his strongest area, followed closely by charms, his mother's specialty. Transfiguration came less naturally but yielded to diligent practice. Potions remained his greatest challenge, requiring a precision and patience that his eager magic sometimes undermined. More significant than his academic progress, however, was his growing connection with the other children in their alliance. What had begun as strategic relationships were blossoming into genuine friendships, particularly with Neville, Susan, and somewhat surprisingly, Daphne Greengrass. Neville's confidence had grown exponentially since the removal of his own bindings. His natural gift for herbology flourished, and he showed unexpected aptitude for ritual magic, with its connection to natural cycles and growing things. His quiet strength and unfailing loyalty made him Harry's closest friend and trusted confidant. Susan brought practical wisdom beyond her years, a trait her aunt attributed to growing up in a household where law enforcement and justice were dinner-table topics. She excelled at seeing the human implications of political decisions and kept Harry grounded when theoretical discussions drifted too far from real-world impacts. Daphne, with her Ice Queen demeanor concealing a razor-sharp intellect, challenged Harry's thinking at every turn. Unlike the others, she never hesitated to point out flaws in his reasoning or question his assumptions. This forthright approach, initially jarring, had earned Harry's respect and eventually his friendship. Other children orbited these core relationships, Hannah Abbott with her warm empathy, Tracy Davis with her pragmatic cunning, Blaise Zabini with his worldly perspective and dry wit. Together, they formed not just a political coalition but a community united by shared learning and genuine connection. On a crisp February morning, 2 weeks before the Magical Theory Symposium, this community gathered in the expanded greenhouse at Rose Cottage, where Neville was demonstrating the properties of a rare magical plant he'd cultivated. The Mimbulus Mimbletonia, he explained proudly, indicating what appeared to be a small grey cactus covered in boils rather than spines. Gran got it for me from an herbologist in Assyria. It's incredibly rare, might be the only one in Britain. What does it do? Susan asked, leaning closer to examine the strange plant. Besides look thoroughly disgusting, Daphne added, though her tone lacked real malice. Neville grinned, not offended in the slightest. Watch. He gently prodded the plant with the tip of his wand, and immediately, the Mimbulus Mimbletonia let out a strange squelching noise and began pulsating. Then, without warning, it squirted jets of a foul-smelling, dark green liquid from every boil. The children shrieked and jumped backward, but not quickly enough, all were splattered with the stinking sap. Stink sap, Neville explained, laughing despite being covered in the substance himself. Completely non-toxic, but incredibly effective at deterring predators. And friends, Harry observed wryly, wiping a glob from his glasses. Brilliant plant, Nev, but maybe a bit more warning next time. Where would be the fun in that? Neville replied with uncharacteristic mischief. His confidence around plants transformed him, where he might stammer or hesitate in other contexts, here he was assured and even playful. As they cleaned themselves with scouring charms, one of the first spells Andromeda had insisted they master, Harry felt a warmth that had nothing to do with the greenhouse's controlled climate. This was what childhood should be, learning, laughter, friendship unmarred by fear or deprivation. The moment was interrupted by Mimsy's arrival. Master Harry, the elf announced, there is being a visitor at the ward line. The wolf man has returned. Harry exchanged a puzzled glance with the others. Wolfman? Who? Remus Lupin, Andromeda supplied, entering the greenhouse behind Mimsy. He's tried to visit twice before, when you were in Diagon Alley or at the Longbottoms. He was a close friend of your parents, one of your father's inner circle at Hogwarts. Harry's heart leapt. Another connection to his parents, someone who had known them well. Can we let him in? Is he safe? Remus is complicated, Andromeda said carefully. He is a werewolf, though carefully managed and not dangerous outside the full moon. He was part of Dumbledore's Order of the Phoenix during the war and has remained loosely affiliated with the headmaster since, though more from necessity than zealotry, I believe. Your father's journals mention him extensively, they called him Moony. One of the marauders, Harry realized, remembering the box of notes from his father's trunk. Along with Padfoot and Wormtail. Sirius Black was Padfoot, and Peter Pettigrew was Wormtail, Andromeda confirmed. Your father was Prongs, for his stag animagus form. Harry made a quick decision. I want to meet him. If he was that close to my parents, but maybe not alone the first time. Andromeda nodded approvingly. A wise precaution. I'll accompany you to the ward line. The rest of you, she addressed the other children, should return to the cottage with Lord Greengrass, who's in the library. Neville immediately objected. I'm coming with Harry. If this could be a threat, me too, Susan insisted. Auntie would want eyes on any unknown visitor. Don't look at me, Daphne said when Harry glanced her way. Of course I'm coming. Someone needs to maintain a clear head if you three get emotional about another parental connection. Her blunt assessment made Harry smile despite the tension of the moment. All right, all four of us, plus Mrs. Tonks. But stay alert, this could be a move by Dumbledore. They made their way to the ward boundary, where a shabby-looking man in patched robes stood waiting. Remus Lupin appeared far older than his actual years, his light brown hair streaked with premature gray, his face lined with scars and exhaustion. When he caught sight of Harry approaching, his amber eyes widened with an expression of such raw emotion that Harry instinctively knew this was no act. Harry, Lupin breathed, taking a half-step forward before stopping himself at the invisible ward line. You look so much like James. But Lily's eyes. Always Lily's eyes. Mr. Lupin, Harry acknowledged, studying the man carefully. You knew my parents well. Your father was my best friend, Lupin replied, his voice rough with feeling. He and Sirius and Peter. We were inseparable at Hogwarts. And Lily, she was the kindest soul I've ever known. She accepted me, flaws and all, once she finally warmed to our group. Why have you come now? Andromeda asked, her tone not unfriendly but cautious. Harry has been at Rose Cottage for months. Lupin's expression clouded. I only recently discovered he was here. After the Prophet article. I've been abroad, working with werewolf packs in Eastern Europe. When I returned and saw the coverage. He looked directly at Harry. I had to see you. To make sure you were truly safe and well. I should have checked on you years ago. I have no excuse. Dumbledore told you I was safe with my relatives, I assume. Harry asked, already knowing the answer. Lupin nodded, shame evident in his posture. He said blood wards protected you there, that you were better off away from the wizarding world until Hogwarts age, that my condition made me an unsuitable guardian even for visits. I accepted it all without question. His voice hardened slightly. A mistake I won't repeat. Harry studied the man for a long moment, weighing what he knew from his parents' journals against the potential risk. His father had trusted Remus Lupin implicitly. His mother had described him as the conscience of the marauders, the one who tried, often unsuccessfully, to rein in their more reckless impulses. Would you be willing to take a vow? Harry asked finally. Not an unbreakable vow, but a magical oath that you're here out of genuine concern and not as Dumbledore's agent? If Lupin was offended by the request, he didn't show it. Instead, he nodded immediately. Of course. I would expect nothing less, given the circumstances. He drew his wand and held it up solemnly. I, Remus John Lupin, swear on my magic that I have come to Rose Cottage today of my own free will, motivated solely by concern for Harry James Potter's well-being and a desire to honor my friendship with his parents. I am not here at Albus Dumbledore's direction or as his agent. So mote it be. A flash of light sealed the vow, and Lupin promptly demonstrated his magic remained intact by casting a simple lumos. Satisfied? He asked, a sad smile playing at his scarred lips. Harry nodded and turned to Andromeda. Can we adjust the wards to allow him entry? Just for today. As head of house, that's your decision, she reminded him. Place your hand on the ward stone marker and state your intent to grant temporary access to Remus Lupin. Harry did as instructed, feeling the familiar tingle of family magic responding to his command. I, Harry James Potter, grant Remus John Lupin temporary access to Rose Cottage for the purpose of peaceful visitation. The wards shimmered visibly for a moment, and Lupin's expression registered surprise as the barrier he'd been unable to cross suddenly permitted his passage. Family-based warding, he murmured. James mentioned the Potter properties had exceptional protections, but I've never experienced anything quite like this. The Potters were known for their warding innovations, Andromeda explained as they began walking back toward the cottage. Particularly defensive measures that distinguish between intent and identity. Lupin nodded, then glanced curiously at the children flanking Harry. I see you've made friends your own age. James would be pleased, he always valued friendship above almost everything else. This is Neville Longbottom, Susan Bones, and Daphne Greengrass, Harry introduced them. And you already seem to know Mrs. Tonks. By reputation mainly, Lupin acknowledged with a respectful nod to Andromeda. Though we may have crossed paths during order meetings. The walk back to the cottage gave Harry time to observe Lupin more carefully. The man moved with a curious grace despite his shabby appearance, and his eyes constantly scanned their surroundings with alert awareness. He asked no invasive questions, simply commenting on the beauty of the grounds and inquiring whether Harry was comfortable in his ancestral home. Inside the cottage, they settled in the garden room, where Mimsy served tea with a wary eye on the newcomer. Lord Greengrass joined them, having been alerted by Hannah of the visitor's arrival. I understand you've been abroad, Mr. Lupin, he said after introductions were complete. Working with werewolf packs, Mrs. Tonks mentioned. Lupin nodded, looking slightly uncomfortable at the direct reference to his condition. Trying to prevent Greyback's influence from spreading further. He's been recruiting again, offering newly turned werewolves community and acceptance in exchange for loyalty to his violent philosophy. Fenrir Greyback, Daphne said, recognition in her voice. The werewolf who specifically targets children. He worked with the Dark Lord during the last war. He did, Lupin confirmed grimly. And I have reason to believe he's preparing for another conflict, though against whom isn't clear. The adults exchanged significant glances at this information, but Harry was more interested in personal matters. How did you become friends with my father? The journals mention pranks and something called the Marauders, but not how you all met. Lupin's face softened with memory. On the Hogwarts Express, our first year. James and Sirius met first, instant kindred spirits, those two, both from old families but with very different views on what that meant. I was in a compartment alone, trying to be invisible, afraid my condition would somehow be obvious to everyone. Your father just burst in, introduced himself without a care in the world, and started talking about Quidditch as if we'd known each other forever. The story led to others, tales of elaborate pranks, midnight explorations of the castle, and eventually, the revelation that made Harry sit forward in sudden interest. They became animagi, illegally, mind you, to keep me company during full moons, Lupin explained, his voice hushed with still evident awe at the gesture. Your father transformed into a magnificent stag. Sirius was a great black dog, and Peter. His expression darkened briefly, Peter was a rat. That's incredibly advanced magic, Lord Greengrass observed. To achieve it while still at school. James and Sirius were exceptional wizards, Lupin said simply. And more determined than anyone I've ever known once they set their minds to something. Could you teach me? Harry asked suddenly. The animagus transformation, I mean. When I'm older. Lupin looked startled, then thoughtful. It's dangerous magic to attempt too young, but with proper preparation and supervision, perhaps in a few years. Your father would certainly approve, though your mother would probably have stern words for me about encouraging reckless magical experimentation. The conversation continued through the afternoon, Lupin sharing stories of Harry's parents that brought them to life in ways even their journals couldn't. He spoke of James's unfailing loyalty, Lily's fierce intellect, their legendary arguments during early Hogwarts years, and the gradual shift that led to their romance. Your mother didn't agree to date your father until 7th year, Lupin revealed with a chuckle. She thought him an arrogant toad, her exact words, for most of their school years. It wasn't until he grew up a bit, stopped hexing people to show off, and proved he could think of someone besides himself that she gave him a chance. As the afternoon waned into evening, Harry found himself increasingly comfortable with Lupin's presence. The man asked thoughtful questions about Harry's education and interests without prying into sensitive areas, expressed genuine pleasure at hearing about his friendships, and showed none of the proprietary attitude Dumbledore had displayed. "Would you consider visiting again?" Harry asked as Lupin prepared to depart. "Perhaps regularly. I'd like to learn more about my parents, and about you." Lupin appeared deeply moved by the invitation. "I would be honored, Harry. Though my condition makes regular scheduling complicated. The cottage has a reinforced cellar that could be adapted, Andromeda suggested, surprising everyone. If you wish to stay during the full moon. With proper precautions, of course." "That's extraordinarily kind," Lupin said, clearly stunned by the offer. "But I wouldn't want to risk. The wolfsbane potion exists now," Lord Greengrass pointed out. "Not widely available due to cost and complexity, but certainly within the Potter estate's resources." Harry nodded eagerly. "We could arrange that. Then you could stay more often, maybe even help with our defense lessons. My friends and I study together several times a week." The naked hope on Lupin's face was answer enough. "If you're certain, yes, I would like that very much." After Lupin's departure, with arrangements made for his return the following week, the adults and children gathered in the library to discuss this new development. "He seems genuine," Susan observed. "And the stories about your parents felt real, Harry, not like someone making things up to get close to you." The vow confirmed his immediate intentions, Andromeda noted. "Though we should remain cautious about what information we share with him initially. His connection to Dumbledore, while apparently not current, was significant for many years. Strategic disclosure would be prudent," Lord Greengrass agreed. "Begin with personal matters regarding Harry's parents, evaluate his reactions to occasional political comments, and gradually determine where his true loyalties lie." Harry listened to their analysis, appreciating their caution while feeling a growing certainty about Lupin. "I trust him," he said simply when they turned to him for his opinion. "Not with everything, not yet. But I believe he cared for my parents and cares for me. That's a start." February melted into March, bringing with it the Magical Theory Symposium and Harry's second planned public appearance. Unlike the relatively spontaneous book signing, this event would feature Harry as an active participant, presenting a selection of his mother's research with commentary from Adalbert Waffling and other theoretical experts. The symposium was held at the Magical Academy of Britain, a post-Hogwarts research institution rarely open to the public. The guest list was carefully curated to include the most influential magical researchers, educators, and political figures with academic interests. Harry stood in an antechamber, reviewing his notes one last time as the assembled guests mingled in the grand lecture hall beyond. He wore formal robes and a deep emerald that matched his eyes, the Potter crest prominent on his chest, his heir ring gleaming on his finger. "Nervous?" Neville asked, adjusting his own formal robes. As Harry's closest friend and the Longbottom heir, he would be seated prominently in the audience. "A bit," Harry admitted. "It's different from the bookshop. These people actually know magical theory. If I get something wrong." "You won't," Daphne stated confidently, looking regal in formal robes of ice blue. "We've rehearsed this presentation a dozen times. You know your mother's research better than anyone except perhaps herself. And remember," Susan added warmly, "even if you did make a mistake, you're 8. The fact that you're presenting at all is already extraordinary." Harry smiled gratefully at his friends. In the months since his emancipation, they had become his anchor, the people who saw him as just Harry, not the boy who lived or the Potter heir, but a boy who loved Quidditch, struggled with potions, and sometimes still had nightmares about his cupboard. "Mr. Potter." Professor Marchbanks, the elderly witch organizing the symposium, poked her head into the antechamber. "We're ready to begin whenever you are." Harry took a deep breath, squared his shoulders, and nodded. "I'm ready." The presentation was a calculated risk, publicly associating Harry with his mother's groundbreaking research while establishing him as more than just a symbol of Voldemort's defeat. The research itself, focusing on the fundamental nature of intent in charm work, challenged certain ministry classifications of magic without directly attacking the existing system. As Harry walked onto the stage, the murmurs of the audience faded into an expectant hush. He approached the lectern, which adjusted itself magically to his height, and looked out at the sea of faces, some curious, some skeptical, all attentive. "Good morning," he began, his voice clear and steady despite his nerves. "My name is Harry Potter, and I'm honored to share with you today's selections from my mother's research on intent-based magical theory." Lily Evans Potter was known primarily for her work in charm innovation, but her journals reveal a deeper interest in the fundamental nature of magic itself, particularly the relationship between a caster's intent and a spell's classification. For the next 20 minutes, Harry guided the audience through his mother's theories, illustrated with carefully chosen excerpts from her journals and supported by references to established magical research. He explained her experimental findings on how identical incantations could produce effects classified as either light or dark, depending solely on the caster's intention and emotional state. "My mother concluded," Harry said, approaching the most controversial aspect of the presentation, "that our current classification system is primarily political and cultural rather than magical in nature." She proposed an alternative framework based on effect rather than methodology, evaluating magic by whether it heals or harms, protects or endangers, respects autonomy or restricts it. A murmur ran through the audience. This was a direct challenge to the ministry's rigid categorization system, though framed as academic discussion rather than political provocation. "I recognize that I'm presenting complex ideas that wizards and witches far older and more experienced than myself continue to debate," Harry acknowledged with the humility they had carefully scripted. "I offer my mother's research not as the final word, but as a contribution to our collective understanding of magic, and perhaps as a foundation for evolving how we educate young witches and wizards about the power we all share." As planned, Adalbert Waffling joined Harry on stage for the discussion portion, followed by several other prominent magical theorists. The conversation was sophisticated but accessible, with Harry holding his own remarkably well despite his age, demonstrating both knowledge of his mother's work and a genuine understanding of its implications. Throughout the discussion, Harry noticed Dumbledore seated in the second row, watching with an unreadable expression. The headmaster had not attempted to approach Harry directly, but his presence sent a clear message: he was observing, evaluating, perhaps recalculating his approach. When the formal presentation concluded to enthusiastic applause, Harry found himself surrounded by academics eager to discuss Lily Potter's research further. Many expressed surprise and delight at discovering her theoretical work had been so advanced, having known her primarily for her practical charm innovations. "Your mother was decades ahead of her time," Professor Vector of Hogwarts told Harry warmly. "I taught her arithmancy, you know, and even then, she was questioning fundamentals the rest of us took for granted. She would be immensely proud of you for bringing her work to light." As the crowd began to disperse for the symposium's luncheon, Harry found his path intercepted by Dumbledore. The headmaster's expression was benign, his blue eyes twinkling behind half-moon spectacles. "A most impressive presentation, Harry," he said, his voice carrying just enough to attract the attention of those nearby. "Lily would indeed be proud to see her work so thoughtfully represented. I particularly appreciated your nuanced approach to the relationship between intent and outcome, something she and I discussed at length during order meetings." The strategic name drop was obvious, Dumbledore publicly associating himself with Lily Potter's research, implying a collaborative relationship that Harry knew from his mother's journals had been far more complex and often contentious. "Thank you, Headmaster," Harry replied evenly. Her journals mentioned those discussions, though her private reflections sometimes diverged from the positions she expressed publicly. "I believe she felt certain perspectives were unwelcome in some contexts." Dumbledore's smile didn't waver, but something in his eyes sharpened. The burdens of leadership during wartime often create unfortunate barriers to fully open academic discourse. A regrettable necessity that, thankfully, you will never have to experience. The subtle reminder of the war, and by extension, Voldemort, hung in the air between them. Before Harry could formulate a response, Lupin appeared at his side, having attended the symposium as Harry's guest. Albus, he greeted the headmaster with a polite nod before turning to Harry. "That was extraordinary, Harry." James would have been completely baffled by half of it, then pretended to understand the rest to impress your mother. He'd be bursting with pride regardless. Harry laughed, grateful for both the support and the moment of levity. "Thanks, Remus. I'm glad you could come." Dumbledore's gaze shifted between them, assessing this new dynamic. "Remus, I wasn't aware you had returned to Britain. Your work with the Pax in Romania was progressing well when last we spoke." "I completed that particular assignment," Lupin replied neutrally. "When I saw Harry's emergence in the Prophet, I felt it was time to fulfill my responsibilities to James and Lily's son." The implied criticism, that Lupin had neglected these responsibilities previously on Dumbledore's assurance, was subtle but unmistakable. The headmaster inclined his head slightly, acknowledging the point without conceding it. A noble sentiment. Family connections are indeed precious, especially for those who have lost so much. Dumbledore's gaze returned to Harry. "Which reminds me, I've been meaning to ask about your living arrangements, Harry. Rose Cottage is a lovely property, but surely rather isolated for a young person. The Potter townhouse in London might offer more convenience for your educational and social activities." The question was a probe, Dumbledore fishing for information about Harry's knowledge of his family properties and testing whether he could still influence Harry's decisions. "Rose Cottage suits me perfectly," Harry replied. "The isolation provides security, the grounds are excellent for both study and recreation, and magical transportation makes distance irrelevant. But thank you for your concern, Headmaster." Of course, Dumbledore nodded genially. "Merely an observation." "Well, I should allow you to enjoy the luncheon. Fascinating presentation, truly. Perhaps we might discuss your mother's theories of intent-based magic further sometime. I have some materials in my personal collection that might complement her research." "I'll consider it," Harry said noncommittally. "Though my schedule is quite full with my ongoing education." "Naturally. Until next time, then." With a slight bow, Dumbledore moved away to join a group of Wizengamot members engaged in animated discussion. "Smooth," Lupin commented quietly once the headmaster was out of earshot. "James couldn't have deflected him better. Though your mother would have been more direct, probably told him exactly why his suggestion was unwelcome." Harry smiled at this insight into his parents' different approaches. "I'm still learning when to be diplomatic and when to be direct. It's complicated when dealing with someone so influential." "Indeed," Lupin agreed. "And Albus has always been a master at conversations with layers of meaning. Speaking of which, that comment about your mother's private reflections diverging from her public positions. Brilliantly placed. I saw several academics react with interest. The observation was astute. Part of their strategy had been to gradually introduce the idea that Lily Potter had disagreed with Dumbledore on fundamental matters, creating space for Harry to chart a course independent of the headmaster's influence while still respecting his parents' legacy. The symposium continued through the afternoon, with Harry participating in smaller discussion groups and building connections with influential academics. By the time the event concluded, he had firmly established himself not merely as a political symbol but as a thoughtful young wizard with substantive ideas and a unique perspective shaped by his mother's groundbreaking research. More importantly, he had publicly positioned himself as neither Dumbledore's protégé nor a political radical, but as something new and independent in the wizarding landscape. The Potter Coalition, as the press had dubbed it, was carving out a distinct position that transcended traditional divisions while honoring magical heritage and innovation alike. Spring bloomed across the Devon countryside, bringing with it a steady rhythm of education, political engagement, and increasingly normal childhood experiences for Harry and his friends. Remus Lupin became a regular presence at Rose Cottage, staying through each full moon with the aid of Wolfsbane potion and gradually becoming both mentor and friend to Harry. Their study group expanded to include Theodore Nott, whose father, despite his traditional dark alignment, was intrigued by the Potter Coalition's emphasis on magical preservation without blood purism. Young Theo was quiet and scholarly, with a dry wit that matched well with Blaise Zabini's more flamboyant humor. Luna Lovegood, a somewhat eccentric girl who lived nearby in Ottery St. Catchpole, joined them as well, brought by her father Xenophilius after he attended one of Harry's public presentations. Luna's perspective on magic was uniquely intuitive, often expressed through references to creatures no one else had heard of, but Harry found her insight surprisingly valuable. The political landscape shifted gradually but significantly around them. Augusta Longbottom, Amelia Bones, and Cyrus Greengrass formed the adult leadership of their coalition in the Wizengamot, advocating for educational reforms, revisions to creature legislation, influenced by Lupin's experiences, and greater transparency in ministry operations. Dumbledore maintained his distance after the symposium, making no further direct approaches to Harry but occasionally sending books or scholarly articles that might interest you, through Professor McGonagall, who had begun a cautious correspondence with Harry about his parents' time at Hogwarts. The investigation into Sirius Black's case proceeded slowly but steadily, with Amelia Bones building a careful file of procedural violations and unanswered questions. They had agreed to wait until Harry's political position was more firmly established before making any public moves on that front, but the groundwork was being laid methodically. In late April, as Harry's 9th birthday approached, their quiet progress was disrupted by an unexpected development. Lord Abbot arrived at Rose Cottage unannounced one evening, his expression grave. "There's been an incident at Hogwarts," he informed the adults gathered in the library, unaware that Harry and his friends were listening from the hidden passage James Potter had documented in his journals. "A student has been petrified, literally turned to stone. Dumbledore is being close-mouthed about the details, but rumors are flying. The Board of Governors is meeting tomorrow to discuss the situation." Petrification? Augusta frowned. "That's obscure magic. Dark and powerful." "Not magic," Lord Greengrass said slowly. "At least, not wizard magic. There are creatures that can petrify, basilisks, gorgons, certain rare magical insects." "Hogwarts is supposed to be the safest place in Britain," Amelia said sharply. "If something capable of petrification is loose in the school." "Exactly," Lord Abbot nodded grimly. "And there's more. Graffiti was found near the petrification site. The Chamber of Secrets has been opened. Enemies of the air beware." A heavy silence fell. From their hiding place, Harry exchanged alarmed glances with Neville and Susan. The Chamber of Secrets was a Hogwarts legend they'd encountered in their historical reading, a hidden chamber supposedly built by Salazar Slytherin himself, rumored to house a monster that would purge the school of those unworthy to study magic. "If this is genuine," Lord Greengrass said finally, "rather than a disturbed student's prank, the implications are serious. The chamber was last rumored to have been opened 50 years ago. A Muggle-born girl died. Myrtle Warren, Andromeda supplied. They call her Moaning Myrtle now. Her ghost still haunts the girl's bathroom where she was killed. The circumstances were hushed up, but the stories persisted in Slytherin House." "Was the culprit ever identified?" Amelia asked. "Officially, yes. A third-year student was expelled," his wand snapped. "But..." Andromeda hesitated. "The details never quite added up. The student in question was Rubeus Hagrid." "Hagrid?" Harry couldn't help exclaiming, giving away their presence. The adults turned toward the hidden passage entrance, which swung open to reveal Harry, Neville, Susan, and Daphne looking sheepish but unrepentant. "I see James's secret passages have been discovered," Andromeda observed dryly. "How much did you hear?" "Enough to be concerned," Harry answered honestly. "Hagrid couldn't have opened any chamber of secrets. He's the gentlest person I've met, despite his size. And he was a Gryffindor, wasn't he? Not a Slytherin." "Your assessment of Hagrid's character may be accurate," Lord Greengrass acknowledged, "but the official record stands. That said, few who know the man believe him capable of the calculated malice such an act would require." The timing of this incident is suspicious, Augusta noted. Just as our coalition gains momentum, a crisis emerges at Hogwarts that will inevitably draw attention back to Dumbledore as the school's protector. You think it's deliberate? Lord Abbot asked. That seems far-fetched, even for political machinations. We're talking about a student being petrified. I'm merely noting the timing, Augusta replied. Though I wouldn't put anything past certain factions who see our influence as threatening. Regardless of political implications, Amelia said firmly, a student has been harmed. That must be our primary concern. Harry stepped fully into the library, his expression determined. I want to help. If this is connected to Slytherin's chamber, it might relate to Voldemort. My parents' journals mentioned rumors that he claimed to be Slytherin's heir. The adults exchanged concerned glances. Harry, Andromeda began gently, this is a situation for trained investigators and the school authorities. You're 9 years old. Almost, Harry corrected automatically. And I know I can't solve this myself. But we have resources, connections, knowledge that might help. My mother's research into protective magic, our political influence to demand transparency from the school, Remus's knowledge of Hogwarts itself. The boy has a point, Lord Greengrass admitted reluctantly. Not about direct involvement, that's out of the question, but about leveraging our collective resources to ensure the situation is handled properly. And if Voldemort is somehow connected, Harry pressed, doesn't that make it my concern too? Because of the prophecy? Another silence fell. They had discussed the prophecy many times over the months, though without knowing its exact contents. The fact that Voldemort had targeted the Potters specifically, based on some prediction, was enough to establish its significance. We don't know that Voldemort is involved, Amelia said cautiously. Let's not jump to conclusions. But we should investigate possible connections, Augusta countered. Discreetly, through appropriate channels. The discussion continued late into the night, with plans formulated to gather information about the Hogwarts incident while maintaining an appropriate distance. Harry and his friends were firmly instructed to focus on their own education and leave the investigation to the adults, instructions they acknowledged dutifully while exchanging glances that suggested they had their own ideas. In the days that followed, the Hogwarts situation dominated Wizarding news. The petrified student was identified as a Ravenclaw prefect, a half-blood with no obvious connection to dark wizards or Slytherin's legendary chamber. Dumbledore issued reassurances about student safety while providing frustratingly few details about the incident itself or measures being taken to prevent recurrence. Harry found himself increasingly preoccupied with the mystery. If Voldemort had indeed been Slytherin's heir, and if he had somehow found a way to reopen the chamber after 50 years, what did that mean about the Dark Lord's current status? His mother's journals had mentioned Horcruxes, objects in which a dark wizard could conceal parts of their soul as insurance against death. The references were vague, clearly information Lily had found disturbing and kept coded in her notes, but enough to suggest she suspected Voldemort had created such abominations. Could the petrifications be connected to a Horcrux? To Voldemort's possible continued existence in some form? These questions consumed Harry's thoughts as April turned to May. His 9th birthday approached, marking nearly a year since his emancipation and the beginning of his new life. He had grown both physically and magically in that time, no longer the small, malnourished boy from the cupboard, but a healthy, confident young wizard with a growing circle of friends and allies. Yet even as he celebrated these changes, a shadow loomed. The Chamber of Secrets. The prophecy. Voldemort. The sense that despite all his progress, larger forces were stirring, forces that would eventually require him to take a stand not just as the Potter heir building a political coalition, but as the boy who lived facing the darkness that had claimed his parents. On the eve of his birthday, Harry stood at his bedroom window, looking out over the moonlit gardens of Rose Cottage. The roses his grandmother had loved were in full bloom, their enchanted varieties producing blossoms in impossible colors, midnight blue, silver, even one that shifted through the spectrum like a living rainbow. Behind him, on his desk, lay the tangible symbols of his journey, his parents' journals, the Potter family grimoire, textbooks annotated in his own hand, letters from new friends, the legal documents of his emancipation. A life built from the ashes of what Dumbledore had planned for him. Yet ahead lay challenges perhaps greater than any he'd faced. Not just political opposition or Dumbledore's manipulations, but the possibility of Voldemort's return, of a prophecy fulfilled, of choices that would define not just his life but potentially the future of Wizarding Britain. Harry Potter, no longer bound by Dumbledore's compulsions, no longer ignorant of his heritage, no longer alone in facing what was to come. The boy who lived, not as a weapon or a symbol, but as a young wizard charting his own course with friends by his side and a growing understanding of what he stood for. The Potter heir, honoring his family's legacy while forging new alliances that transcended old divisions. As midnight approached, bringing with it his 9th birthday, Harry made a silent promise to himself. Whatever came, Chamber of Secrets, prophecy, Voldemort, he would face it not as Dumbledore's pawn or as Voldemort's nemesis, but as himself. As Harry. With the strength of his magic, the wisdom of his parents' legacy, and the support of friends who saw him as more than a legend. That would be enough. It had to be. The end. Thank you for watching this video. Please be sure to subscribe to our channel and like this video.